Daniel, if you can confirm.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the I believe we are.
Thank you very much. Right, I'll start. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Area Planning Committee. My name is Councillor Stephen Brainerd. I'll be chairing this meeting this evening. I will ask committee members to introduce themselves, starting with Councillor Perks, please. You're muted.
Sorry, Councillor Linda Perks, Vice Chair of the committee.
Councillor Cow.
Councillor Cow from Thamesmead Moorings.
Councillor Dillon.
Councillor Dillon, Charlton Ward.
Councillor Fletcher.
Councillor Nigel Fletcher, Eltham South Ward.
Councillor Gardner.
Councillor David Gardner, Woolwich Common Ward.
And finally, oh no, I've got...
You've got me, Chair, Clive.
Yeah, I've got you, sorry, Clive, you dropped to the bottom of my screen. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Please introduce yourself.
Councillor Clive Martin, Abbey Wood Ward.
Thank you. And
Did you pick me up, Chair?
I'm just going to find you. You're a blank screen for me, Councillor Hills. If you could introduce yourself, that'd be grand.
I'm Councillor John Hills, Cold Harbour and New Eltham Ward Chair.
Thank you very much. Also present are officers, and could you introduce yourself, please, officers?
Tori Gagan, Assistant Director of Planning.
Nasir Ali, Corporate Governance Officer.
Alex Smith, Area Planning Manager.
Matthew Lund, Planning Officer.
Daniel Wilkinson, Corporate Governance Officer.
Fine. And I think that leaves, does that Joe leave you?
Yeah, Joe Higgins, Planning Officer.
Thank you very much. This meeting is being held under emergency regulations, virtual meetings. New emergency regulations have been introduced to enable local authorities to hold remote meetings. To ensure the smooth running of these virtual meetings, some of the council procedures have been amended in accordance with emergency powers. Only those members of the public who have registered to speak and have been provided with the link can participate in the meeting. During the meeting, all participants will be in control of their own microphone on Zoom. The microphone should be set at mute at all times until I invite you to address the committee. Any member of the Area Planning Committee who wishes to ask questions of an officer or to a speaker who has verbally addressed the Area Planning Committee or to speak during the discussion or part of the meeting should do so by raising the blue hand icon on Zoom. Please be patient as I will try to be aware that you wish to speak and will come to you in due course. Each speaker, ordinary member of the public, will have 2 minutes or more at my discretion. Elected members will have up to 5 minutes, and then there will be representatives of the applicant. After the speakers have spoken, they will have the opportunity to address questions to the speaker, after which the speaker's participation in the meeting will end. Any member of the Area Planning Committee must notify the chair before any voting takes place if they have lost connectivity, and it must be recorded within the minutes of that meeting. And can I just add my own additional note to that? I'm not talking about the odd garbled section where someone asks someone to repeat something. Excuse me. I'm talking about a significant amount of time, anything more than 3 to 4 minutes. You must inform the secretary, the clerk, sorry, before any voting takes place. Voting on the agenda item will take place by myself asking each member of the Area Planning Committee how they wish to vote. In attendance, we've already had the items which are to be considered are listed on the agenda. After each submission, members of the committee may wish to ask then ask their questions. I have, my machine has just gone strange on me. Hold on 1 second. I'm going to try again. Be patient with me. Thank you very much. Fine. We'll now start the agenda. It was my agenda that disappeared. Apologies for absence. Item 1. Do we have any apologies for absence? We have
We have an
one
apology for
apology
late.
for lateness, I think.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Urgent business. Is there any urgent business? No, I hear none. Declarations of interest. Members are required to declare any personal or financial interest they may have on items for consideration. And I do have one raised for item 5, Councillor Gardner. Could you clarify that, please, for us, for the sake of the minutes?
Thank you, Chair. I'd already objected to the original application in relation to 30 Crescent Road, item 5, and at a previous planning committee, and therefore I could be perceived as having predetermined, and therefore I will absent myself on that item.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gardner. In that case, can we move on to the presenting officer, Alex Smith, for item 5 on the agenda?
Sorry, Chair, we've missed minutes.
Oh, sorry, I did it last night as well. That's Tuesday evening. Most innumerate of me. Again, we need to approve the minutes of the previous meeting, the meeting held on the 25th of February. Councillors in attendance were Gary Dillon, Clive Mardner, Dominic Mbang, Linda Perks and John Hills. Are these an accurate representation of the meeting that you participated in?
I would propose they are, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, now we will get back to my numbers in the right order, which is item 5, Alex Smith, presenting officer for 30 Crescent Road, Woolwich, London, SE18 7BN.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm hoping that everybody can now see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Yes, yeah, great. Okay, so item 5, 30 Crescent Road. This application is for a retrospective change of use from an existing 4-bedroom single dwelling house to a 5-bedroom 10-person HMO. Permission for associated external alterations are not sought. This application is being considered at this committee as it has been called in by a local councillor with an objection also. There's also one objection that's been received from a nearby occupier. Objections raise the following considerations: impact upon amenity, quality of accommodation, and over concentration of HMOs which do not cater for families or sustainable communities. Those are addressed within the officer's report. The application was originally presented in front of members on the 25th of February, however was deferred at that time for a site visit. Site visit was planned Monday just gone, 20th of July. Site plan, just identifying the location of the site in red. It's located on the western side of Crescent Road, and whilst it's not located in a conservation area, it is a locally listed building, and then can be seen within this aerial here. It's located close to Woolwich Town Centre, and has a PTL rating of 6A, which is a good level of public transport accessibility. It's 0.3 miles away, or 6-minute walk from the train station. Just move into photos. Here's some photos of the site. To the left of the screen, you'll see the front of 30 Crescent Road, and to the right, the rear garden area. Here are some internal photographs. The left photo shows an existing kitchen within the property, which will be seen in the plan shortly. And on the right-hand side, what is currently a communal area, but is proposed to be a second kitchen within this current proposal. Then the last two photos just shows photos of the existing bedrooms that are here. These currently are the pre-existing drawings, which show the state of the property before any unauthorised works were carried out. As can be seen from the basement area, which is on the left of the screen, this is for storage purposes only. And at ground floor level, there had been a reception, living room, to the front, a dining room, and then a self-contained kitchen with direct access into the garden at the rear, with a rear bathroom and shower facility. I'm not sure whether everyone can see my cursor, but that's located here. On the upper floors, there were 4 bedrooms providing accommodation for 8 occupants, given the size of each room. A bathroom was also provided on the first floor. In relation to the loss of the existing single dwelling house, it is worth noting that the council's core strategy does not include any policies which protect the loss of family-sized accommodation in relation to the conversion of a single family dwelling house into a HMO accommodation. In addition to this, given the nature of a HMO, should permission be granted for the works, this would not prevent the accommodation being converted back into a single family dwelling house at a later date. On this basis, the loss of a single family dwelling house is considered acceptable in this instance. Moving on to the existing works, it should be on this plan, you've got to the left-hand side the basement, which is not proposed to change. It will continue to remain as a storage area. On the middle floor plan that you can see is the current situation of the site, where you have a bedroom at the front, communal or what's noted as dining area in the middle, kitchen to the rear, and a shower. What is actually proposed is that it will continue to have a bedroom at the front for 2 people, but in the middle, that dining area or communal area will become a second kitchen, along with the first kitchen at the rear and WC. And that's to ensure that having a second kitchen for the amount of people therefore meets the square meterage required for a HMO of this size for kitchen facilities. Moving on to the upper floors, there would be an additional 4 bedrooms providing accommodations for up to a further 8 residents. The bathroom accommodation would be provided on both the first floor as well as the smaller bathroom at ground floor level, giving a total of 14.29 square metres, providing a shower room and WC at ground floor, as well as a toilet and bathroom on the first floor, which can be seen here. This again complies with the HMO standards for shared bathroom facilities. On this basis, and for the reasons set out in the officer's report, the quality of the HMO accommodation provided is considered to be acceptable. And then on this slide, it's just showing the quality standards for this HMO and what's expected. It's considered this summary shows how each of the rooms complies with the standards set out by the council in relationship to HMOs. In relationship to the impact on amenity of adjoining occupiers, as there are no external alterations which form part of the application, this element of the proposal is considered to be acceptable. In relation to noise and disturbance from the HMO use, a review has been undertaken of the number of registered HMOs within Crescent Road, and only a total of 7 other properties out of over 100 in Crescent Road have a registered licence with the council. This, combined with the fact that the pre-existing use could have occupied up to 8 persons, the impact on the amenity of adjoining owner occupiers is not considered to be unacceptable, and over and above that, what would have been seen in the existing property. So that's the end of my presentation. Members are requested to consider officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Over to members. Members, questions to the officer, please. Anyone got questions for the officer? Let's have a look at my board. Yes, Councillor Perks first, then Councillor Fletcher, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted Alex to confirm around the conditions concerning the timetable for the upgrading of the property to include the second kitchen. There is a condition, isn't there, Alex, that it should be done, well, it should be commenced within 6 months and completed within the 6 months of any permission granted. Is that right, please?
That is correct. I think it was added as part of the addendum that members would have been sent, and it does state that development to which this permission relates must begin within 6 months of the date of the permission, and that's mainly, majority of the rooms are there. It is that second kitchen to ensure that it complies with our HMO standards that needs to be put in place to comply with what's set out in the officer's report. Part B of that condition ensures that it must be substantially completed within 6 months, and that is considered to substantially completed is that all of those elements that would ensure a good quality living environment is implemented. And then within 1 month following substantial completion, they must apply for approval from the local authority to demonstrate that all of that has been put in place.
Does that answer your question, Linda? Okay, right. Councillor Fletcher, then Councillor Mardner, please.
Thank you, Chair. I saw on the report that there's not been an application for an HMO. Is it normal for that to occur after we've given permission, or will we expect those to be submitted at the same time? And secondly, do we know, is it currently in use as an HMO? Because I think there's references to it being an unlawful conversion, but is it currently operating as an unlawful HMO?
So in terms of the unlawfulness, it does appear that it is being used unlawfully as a HMO at this point in time. There is no enforcement history in regards to it in its current state. The only enforcement history we have is in 2008 when it was the relevant history talks about a double room being let, but that was closed. So the applicant has submitted this application for 10 persons to live there, and in doing so, the majority of it is retrospective. The part that is proposal and would need to be implemented is the kitchen facilities. Apologies, Councillor Fletcher, I've forgotten your first part of your question though.
It was just on whether we would normally expect there to be an HMO application alongside the change of use, or because I think it said that there hasn't been one submitted, or will we expect that to happen after consent's given? I
believe you may be referring to the HMO license under normal circumstances. Yes, that would come after planning permission is granted.
Councillor Fletcher, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Mardner. Could you unmute yourself, Clive?
Yeah, I've done it.
Thank you.
I just want a quick follow-up to Councillor Fletcher's question. We are saying it's currently operating unlawfully. Has this been reported to licensing at all, and should it be operating? I know it's gone off a little bit off the topic, but should it have been reported, or has it been reported to licensing? Because we shouldn't really be allowing this to be operating unlawfully. That's my first question. My second question, maybe a policy question, which probably Victoria may be able to answer, because I'm still not clear. You said that there's no policy in relation to HMO accommodation, especially in terms of loss of dwelling places. If I've got that right, is it something that we probably need to be looking at? And thirdly, in terms of the quality standards, I'm looking at the WC, and you said yes that it meets the standard, but you said it was taken all the WCs together, it complies with the standard. Is that the normal way or the usual way of measuring it? or is it done separately for each floor? Thank you.
So in terms of the first question regarding HMO, our licensing team being aware of it, I'm not sure they were aware of it to start with, but as part of any HMO application that we receive, we consult them. So our HMO licensing team are fully aware of it now. If you read within the addendum at 4.51, one of the consultee responses is from our HMO licensing team, who have raised no objections subject to some informatives. One of those stating that they must register the premises with council as a HMO, so submit a license. So they are fully aware of it, but as I say, no objections raised. In regards to the loss of family housing, you're right that we don't have a policy that stops that. There is no policy that stops it from turning into a HMO and considered a loss of housing as a reason for refusal. In terms of the principle, the London Plan Policy 3.8 recognises that shared accommodation or HMO are a strategically important part of the London offer. And the council's SPD for HMOs also states that it's important for the borough to support a range of homes in terms of size, tenure, in order to meet a variety of housing needs. But those HMOs have to be of a good standard, and given the standard of accommodation here, room sizes, the communal facilities it provides, that's considered to meet all those relevant standards. And then that obviously carries on to in terms of the standards. So there is the table that I presented, and 6 to 10 occupants, the standard for 2 bathrooms and 2 toilets with a hand wash basin. That's the overall the HMO. So this has both. So in terms of the plans, and I don't know whether you wish me to bring those back up, but the first floor level has a bathroom with a bath and a WC. I'm not sure whether it has a shower in, and the applicant, I believe, is with us tonight, so they can confirm. And then downstairs has a shower facility with a toilet also. So it's considered that this is sufficient enough for the number of occupants proposed.
Okay, thank you.
I did have Councillor Dillon on my list, but he seems to have changed his mind. Councillor Dillon, did you want to speak or ask a question?
I was looking at 5.5, Chair, but I think that's an issue I may raise with the applicant.
Okay, thank you.
About the number of occupants.
Okay, thank you. Just one thing, Alex, from my memory of having looked at the drawings, is one of the bathroom, shower, toilet facilities accessed via the kitchen, the existing kitchen?
Yes, Chair, that is correct. It is.
Is that acceptable in terms of health and safety regs that we work to?
It's not necessarily a planning consideration in terms of accessing off the kitchen, but it is what is existing and what was existing as part of a single family. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Right. If there are no other questions from members, I would ask the owner of the premises, who's with us this evening, Bérangère Quex, whether she could make her presentation about the HMO and its reasoning, please.
Yes, good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I attended the committee in February, and I don't know if I need to explain the history, but this is a residential home in which I lived with my family and then separated from my husband, who continues to live in the property and who passed away last year in May. He had some lodgers in the house, and I decided that if, instead of going through legal proceedings to evict these people, that I will go through trying to improve the property and applying for an HMO planning application. I was in touch with the licensing office in the Greenwich Council and was quite confused in terms of whether a license needs to be applied first or planning permission first. And I was under the impression that I need to go through the planning application first before and then be maybe granted permission and then regularize the licensing position. My long-term intention with this property is to perhaps turn it back into residential later, because I have a son who is currently studying in the UK and who intends to go and work in London later. But this is, this is a kind of question mark. In terms of number of occupants, there was a discussion at the last committee where I did explain that it was never my intention to apply for 10 people to live in the house, and I will certainly ensure that there are no 10 people living in this house. However, I do understand that the bedrooms are big and are considered in the eyes of the HMO regulation as being double bedroom, and therefore for the purpose of this planning application, it has to be for an occupancy of 10. I mean, this is not my wish, but I understand that this is, and maybe the planning officer can shed some light on that. In terms of the question on the bathroom, the first floor bathroom is a bath shower together, and then the kitchen downstairs has access to the second bathroom. I haven't proposed to modify this because it's not my intention to have an intense usage in terms of HMO of the property, but to perhaps turn it back into residential usage later. In terms of work done to the property, I'm intending to renovate the facade of it, get it repainted, repointed, etc., where necessary, and the back of it as well, so that it should be much more presentable in the coming months. I'm not sure I'm giving enough information, or if any of the members have got questions. It's a bit difficult for me just on the phone, and I apologize, but I couldn't. I'm away on holiday and I couldn't join via Zoom with the video today.
Okay. Well, look. Thank you very much for that. Members, do you have any questions for Madam Quex? I've got Councillor Perks, and the first hand up on my screen was that of Councillor Dillon's. Councillor Dillon, if you could ask your question, please.
I've got a couple, just quickies. Could you tell us how long you've owned the property?
I bought it in July 2002.
2002. And can you tell me how long the property has been used for subletting?
Since last year, 2018.
2018. Okay. And my last question is to Alex. Alex, considering the statement made by the lady, are we in a position to put a condition in on the number of people allowed to occupy? The lady stated that she's not looking to put 10 people in, and at 5.5 it says that she suggests that is one occupier per room. Where do we stand on that?
In terms of assessing it, because the HMO standards say for a single bedroom it has to be 9 square meters. In terms of a double bedroom, the standards for that are 12 square meters. Now each of the rooms are above and beyond 12 square meters, so it's considered that is a double bedroom, and therefore it could occupy 2. So that's why we've suggested it is 10 occupants, because we have to assess it on that basis, and that is why it had to have 2 kitchens. It's not something we would normally condition on a consent.
But
like
is it something that we can consider though, considering under 5.5 it's noted that email correspondence from the applicant stated that the property was only intended to be occupied by 5 persons, 1 per room. Are we in a position to possibly put that as a condition should we
problem is the plans that you're approving are the plans showing double beds, which would occupy 2 people per room. So it would require the plans to be changed also.
Okay.
Sorry, Chair.
Could I ask a question, please?
Of course.
Is it possible that we could restrict it when I am at the stage of applying for the license, and just apply for a license that would restrict the usage to five occupiers?
Chair, can I answer that?
Yeah, I was just yes.
That would, I think, in terms of the license, that would be up to the applicant how they apply at that point. What we're looking at the moment is the planning application, and that is for occupants 10 people, and it's to ensure that from an enforcement side of things, if you restrict it to say 5 occupants, that would be quite hard to enforce. But enforcing to ensure that it's 10 people is easier given the size of the rooms.
Okay, thank you. Next question, Linda Perks, Councillor Linda Perks.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Madam Quakes. I just wanted to ask about the time limits that have been introduced into the condition. Do you think you'll be able to meet the time limits of at least commencing the kitchen within 6 months and completing it within a further 6 months?
Yes, I want to be doing this as quick as possible. Yes.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. That's my question. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Mardner, please.
I've got 2 questions for the applicant. Firstly, is the building sort of wheelchair accessible? That's the first, accessible to the bedrooms. Secondly, just tell me about who's got access to the rear garden and whose responsibility is it to make sure the rear garden is presentable. I'm not sure that's the right word, but who's got responsibility for the rear garden? And are you wheelchair accessible?
The front of the property has got a few stairs, as are the other houses to this road. So I suppose I am not sure that this is kind of compliant with wheelchair accessibility. In terms of the rear garden, there is no stairs there to go to access the rear garden, and the rear garden responsibility is one for the licensee and the manager of the property. I haven't seen the photos, but I can tell you that a year earlier, it was much worse with a lot of trees, etc. And I got it a very good trim. So I will ensure that this is done on a regular basis. Otherwise, my neighbours will not be happy anyway.
Alex, can you tell us the position in relation, or Victoria, with the property not being wheelchair accessible?
So in terms of a HMO, there is no requirement for it to be wheelchair accessible. And I'll obviously confirm from the applicant and the site visit I undertook on Monday, and there are a number of steps on the front door, which would make it there wouldn't be level access. And actually, the door from memory is quite narrow. So I would say there are restrictions within the property itself for wheelchairs. Anyway,
can I just come back to that? I mean, Alex or Victoria, how does that square to our overall sort of equality plan that we have in terms of our policy? So say that question again.
So, no, well, the policy doesn't apply to HMOs in terms of wheelchair accessibility. So in terms of an overall development, when it's over 10 units, then it would have to create wheelchair accessible units, but it's not applicable in this instance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sorry,
Just
Chair,
one.
sorry to interrupt. Can I just add to that? Although that might not be accessible for people in wheelchairs, anybody that may have it does have ground floor access to a bathroom. So there are no restrictions if somebody has a disability.
Just one question from me, Madam, which is, was there an enforcement notice served on the premises in 2008?
I am not aware of it, and at that time I separated from my husband, so I was living in Bexley Heath. And unfortunately, we got through a very acrimonial divorce, and I wasn't in a position to know everything. I didn't have the keys to the property.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Madam Craigs?
I do not have question on my side. No, thank you.
No, and any other questions from elected members? Otherwise, we'll open this up to our general debate. And just to remind people that while we are debating, as this is a public meeting as well, that it is a debate for the elected members of this committee and not for anyone else to interject. Okay, thank you very much. Members, anyone's comments, please, initially, on the officer's recommendation to grant permission for this premises? Any comments? I'm looking down my screen for anyone waving their hands. Councillor Perks.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to support this application, Chair. I think the applicant has explained her circumstances very honestly. She had come to the committee before. I recollect the case. I think that I'd be quite happy, particularly that we've imposed the condition that the kitchen should be done quickly, because it's important that the situation is regulated as soon as possible. So I'd be quite happy to support this.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree with Councillor Perks. I think the applicant has given a reasonable explanation of why it's a retrospective application, which is usually a bit of a red flag for me. But I think that the other comments that were made about the HMO application itself, in terms of restricting numbers and things, will provide a sort of second line of security to ensure that it's operating properly. And I think that she sounds absolutely committed to working with that process. So on that basis, I think if I looked at that as an HMO for 10 people, I would have been slightly concerned. I understand the reasons why, because that's the maximum capacity that we're considering it on that basis. But I think with the process of the HMO licensing that we've got, I think it's reasonable for us to give permission on this application and leave it to licensing to ensure that it's appropriately licensed. So on that basis, I'm happy to support the officer recommendation.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Mardner, please, your comments.
Yes, I'm tempted to accept the explanation that we've received. At the moment, it's operating unlawfully, and in my opinion, I think we need to get to a situation where it could be operating lawfully very quickly. Although we've been given 6 months, I'm suggesting we could try and say for 3 months and try and get the situation rectified as quickly as possible. My second point will go more to a policy, Chair, which I'm hoping that you will be able to pick up at some time. The first thing, the policy in relation to HMOs and sort of the loss of the family homes. I think we need to be looking at that, and maybe the cabinet member or someone could think that we probably do need to draw up some sort of policy on that. And secondly, I think we need to have a policy in terms of wheelchair accessibility to HMOs, because we will be defying our equality laws if we're not allowing access to people with disabilities. In a matter, so I'm happy to support the application. I'm also
on the first one.
Excuse me. I'm also happy that the applicant is saying that it's for 5 people, and I'm happy that licensing will deal with that, Chair. So on that basis, I'm happy to support the application.
Thank you very much. I think someone's got their mic open, and if you're not speaking, could you keep your mic closed, please? And I think I'm trying to think who it was, but let's move on. Right. Any other comments before we go to the vote on this one? Any other comments? I'll just double check. There's no more hands being waved at me. No, I don't see any. In that case, could I ask the clerk of the meeting to ask the councillor members of the committee how they wish to vote? And I'll remind you at this point, if anyone has lost communication for any significant amount of time, they must declare this and for how long they lost communication before they vote. And the decision is to support or not support the officer's recommendations on this application. So could the clerk please ask the first councillor how they wish to vote, either to agree or not agree with the officer's recommendation?
Councillor Dillon, are you for or against the application?
For.
Councillor Hills, do you agree or disagree with the officer's recommendations?
Agreed. For.
Councillor Lacow, are you for or against the recommendations?
For.
Councillor Fletcher, are you for or against the recommendations?
For.
Councillor Mon, are you for or against the recommendations?
For.
Councillor Perks, are you for or against the recommendations?
For.
And Councillor Brain, are you for or against the recommendations?
I'm for the recommendations.
I can confirm the area committee unanimously agrees the officer's recommendations.
Fine, thank you. There were 2 conditions, I think, attached to that approval. The one relating, we just discussed, with regard to the works on the second kitchen to be completed within 6 months. And secondly, there was the condition about the basement not to be used except for storage. But other than that, that's a unanimous decision. And thank you on that one, members. We're not going home yet. We've got another 2 items on the agenda. But this is the end of the meeting for Madame, and also just to say bon nuit.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all.
Thank you. Okay, we now move on to item 6 on the agenda, and Councillor Gardner can rejoin the meeting fully now. So could I ask Officer Joe Higgins, please, to make the presentation on Equitable House, please.
Okay, I'll just share my share my screen to go with you.
Thank you.
Can everyone see my title page? Yep. Okay, this is item number 6, Equitable House, 7 General Gordon Square, Woolwich in London. The application seeks retrospective planning permission and listed building consent for the construction of a roof extension with dormer windows at the front and side elevations, installation of balustrades to form roof terraces to facilitate the change of use of the 3rd and 4th floors from offices, which is use class B1, to 9 self-contained holiday lets, which is use class C1, including 1 wheelchair accessible unit, unit 9, together with provision of associated waste and cycle storage at lower ground and upper ground floor level, and installation of extractor vents on the rear elevation. As I've already said, this is a retrospective consent. These works have already been implemented. The reason the application is before members is because it was called in by Councillor Smith, who also objected to the proposal. The application site comprises of Equitable House, which is a Grade 2 listed building and is located in Woolwich Town Centre facing General Gordon Square, and is a prominent landmark building within the central area of Woolwich. Equitable House includes uses on the lower floors, including healthcare facility, betting shop, cafe, and a public house. The site is located in the Woolwich Conservation Area, which was designated in May 2019. The third and fourth floors of the building to which the current applications relate are currently in use in unlawful use as 9 short-term holiday lets. Prior to this, the lawful use of the third floor and fourth floor was B1 offices. The site has excellent links to public transport with Woolwich Arsenal Station and the DLR immediately adjacent to the site. I'll just go through a few aerial photos of the site so you can understand the context. So this is the view looking north. This is the view looking east. This is the view looking south. And this is the view looking west. The next set of slides are some photos of the existing proposal. You can see the works as implemented. This is the east side elevation. This is the rear elevation. And this is the west side elevation. These two photos are taken of the rear service yard, which contains the refuse and cycle storage, which is included in the current proposal. This is accessed from Woolwich New Road, which you see in the top of the photos. And these are photos from inside the holiday lets. All of the internal works have been implemented. In terms of public consultation, 1 letter of support was received and 1 objection received from Councillor Smith. The objection cited loss of C3 residential housing as the only reason for the objection. This point of objection is covered within the committee report. Before going into the application in more detail, I'll briefly touch on the planning history as it is relevant to the assessment. The current applications follow the refusal under delegated powers in April 2019 of applications for similar works, including C1 holiday lets on the 3rd and 4th floors. One of the refusal reasons was because the proposal was considered to have resulted in the loss of housing. The site planning permission was granted for the change of use of the 3rd and 4th floors to 9 self-contained holiday lets, to 9 self-contained residential flats, which is use class C3 in 2015. However, this use was never implemented because these flats were never occupied as residential dwellings, but were in fact occupied as short-term holiday lets. This 2015 permission has also since expired. In light of this, the current proposal cannot be considered to have resulted in the loss of housing, as the site was never used for housing and there is no lawful fallback position to a residential use of the site. This assessment is supported by the council's legal officers. The use of the site as holiday lets is supported by policy 4.5 of the London Plan and policy EA5 of the core strategy, which seeks to promote the provision of additional tourist infrastructure. The April 2019 applications were also refused because the rear balustrades, which we'll see later, were considered overly prominent and harmful to the character of the Grade 2 listed host building. The balustrades remain unchanged in the current application. However, as the principle of the provision of holiday accommodation is supported, this is considered to be a benefit of the proposal, which outweighs the harm to the host building and the surrounding conservation area. And this viewpoint is supported by the council's conservation officer. I'll now go into the proposal in more detail. This is the pre-existing 3rd floor. This is the pre-existing 4th floor plan prior to any of the roof extensions being constructed. So there is very little actual floor space on the plan. This is the proposed development plan, and these internal arrangements have been implemented. So there are 9 short-term holiday lets. 8 of them are 3 bedrooms and 1 of them is a 2-bedroom. Access to this floor is via a lift from ground floor level. Which you can see in the middle where my mouse is there. There's also a stair core going around it. There's a secondary stair core in the left-hand corner of the building as well, I can see here. The bedrooms would be provided on this floor as well as a bathroom in each unit. And then on the fourth floor plan, which you can see here, this floor is comprising of the communal facilities, including living room, dining room, and kitchen, as well as a private roof terrace for each unit. This floor is accessed for each unit internally within each unit. This is the existing lower ground floor plan, or pre-existing lower ground floor plan, sorry. And here you can see the proposed waste and cycle storage for the site. So in the top left, you can see the cycle storage, which is at basement level, and then above that, you can see the proposed waste and cycle proposed waste area, which is stored above the cycle area and accessed by a ramp, which you can see there. No on-site car parking is proposed. I'll now briefly go through the external alterations, which are also sought permission. These external alterations have all been implemented. So that's the existing pre-existing front elevation. This is the proposed front elevation. You can see that a roof extension has been constructed, as well as the addition of dormer windows on the front elevation. This was the pre-existing rear elevation. And this is the proposed rear elevation. You can see the roof extensions on top there, as well as the balustrades. The balustrades are at the height that is required by building regulations, and there's no facility to make them lower and comply with the building regulations. You can also see new extractor vents, which are included in the description. These are considered to be acceptable. This is the pre-existing side elevations, both of them. And again, you can see the addition of dormer windows on both roof slopes. So in summary, the application is considered to have overcome the reason of recusal on the two previous applications from April 2019, and would have the proposed use as holiday lets is supported, and the proposal would have an acceptable impact on the character and significance of the Grade 2 listed host building and surrounding Woolwich conservation area. Members are requested to grant full plan permission and listed building consent. That's me done with my presentation. Chair, I think you're muted.
It's automatically to it. Before we go to members' questions to the officer, just two pieces of housekeeping. Councillor Mbang has joined us, but will not be able to vote on item 6. He was too late for that. He will have been too late for that, but he's welcome to obviously sit there and wait for item 7. And I believe that we have lost Councillor Hills. And I don't believe, I've just been informed that, and we can't seem to raise him. So we may have lost one voting member there. But with that, no further ado, let's move on to members of the committee's question to Joe, please. Let's have a look at my list. Apologies. Right. I've got first two up. Councillor Fletcher, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, can I ask when the current modifications were made? I can't seem to find it in the report at the moment. And presumably they would also have required, because they require listed building consent, presumably they receive no permission at all, either planning or listed building consent for those.
Yeah, I can address this. So I understand that the works were completed in the end of 2018. In terms of regarding as to whether there was planning and listed building consent, as I said in the presentation, planning permission and listed building consent was granted for a roof extension, and in the internal arrangements to facilitate conversion to C3 residential flats, 9 of them. The development wasn't entirely built in accordance with those approved details, although in general character and appearance it was the same. However, the proposal seeks to formalise the development as built, and that is what is shown on the drawings I've just shown you.
Thank you. This might be a question for the applicant, but I assume in that case that when the conversion was made, they were operating in the belief that they had permission for the conversion into flats, and the material issue is that they weren't flats, they were holiday lets. But you're saying that the layout and design was pretty much the same.
In terms of the residential layout internally, I understand it's broadly consistent. As you can see, they are laid out as you would expect a residential flat to be, but the use has never been as occupied by single families. It's been holiday lets.
Is that a suitable response for you?
Yes, very helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Gardner, please.
Thank you, Chair. Joe, two questions really. Firstly, just on a planning class, am I right? This is planning class C1, which is the same as hotels, and therefore, if they wanted to turn it to a hotel, they wouldn't need any further permission, but they would need further permission to turn it to back to C3, or is that extant the permission for residential? That's the first question. The second question is on the original application, which seems to be around based on the Conservation Officer's comments. See, they seem to have not followed the original approval, and they're coming retrospectively for the change. I just wondered, given that the owners are, well-versed developers and so forth, they're not sort of naive householders who don't know what needs to be the planning process is. I just wonder why this has come about. Maybe this is a question for the applicant, why they have, but why, from a RBG point of view, we weren't checking that the original build was in line with the planning approval originally given.
Okay, yeah, I can address those two questions. I'll do the first one first. So you asked whether the proposal or the current use as holiday lets as a C1 use class, and it is a C1 use class. That is the same as hotel accommodation. And in terms of whether they wanted to change it into a more typical holiday in terms of lots of rooms and you're staying in a few days, they would require listed building consent for any internal changes and any external changes necessary to facilitate that. We've also put a condition on, which is in Appendix 2 of the report, which restricts the use of the site as described in this application as short-term holiday lets. We also restrict the number of bedrooms by number, and to the current number, which I think 26 or 28. And we also restrict that they have the classes of, that's what we restrict in terms of holiday use. They would require permission from us to change it into a more typical hotel. And then you asked whether it would require permission to go from what is current arrangement to residential dwellings, which would be a C3 use class. So that would require planning permission because this is a change of use. So we would have control over that. We also have a condition to reinforce this point, preventing any of the units or any part of the site being used as self-contained C3 residential accommodation. But that answers that question. And then in terms of how the site was, a lot of these works were implemented unlawfully. The justification and reasons for that is a question best for the applicant. And in terms of why this wasn't spotted by the council, we added a condition to our original permission stating that they had to implement it in accordance with the approved plan, and the expectations of those conditions are followed. A breach of that condition opens up the applicant to enforcement action. Our enforcement team has had involvement in the site, particularly in relation to the unlawful uses, holiday lets. But maybe you'll be aware that these works were ongoing for quite a substantial period of time, with scaffolding and terrace fencing up around the building. And at first glance, it would appear to have been built in accordance with what we originally approved, which perhaps is why this wasn't spotted earlier on in the construction of the site as is.
So, Chair, just to add to that as well, In terms of enforcement, it is a small team that tends to be reactive. So unless we're aware of a problem and somebody deviating from their approved plans, we wouldn't ordinarily carry out development inspections as a development progresses. But once we're aware of a problem, we will follow it up. And I think as soon as we realised they were short-term lets, then enforcement were involved.
Thank you, Vicky. Other questioners. Councillor Marden, please.
Yes, just a couple of things. When the planning application was introduced, I understood you said that Councillor Smith objected. I haven't got the report in front of me and I don't know if it was in the report. Are you able to say what those objections were? That's the first bit. And the second bit, I probably know the answer to this. In terms of accessibility for these holiday homes, are they wheelchair accessible? Thank you.
Okay, I can answer both of those points. So you asked what the substance of Councillor Smith's objection was. Councillor Smith only objected to the use as short-term holiday lets. There wasn't a great amount of detail in that comment. It is included and addressed in the officer's report. Councillor Smith also in City Head before members. In terms of wheelchair accessibility, Unit 9, which is in the top left-hand corner of the site, is to be adapted to be compliant with wheelchair accessibility for hotel accommodation. We have a condition requiring details to confirm that it is implemented in accordance with these accessibility criteria. And this will be reviewed by our accessibility officer. The provision of one of the units as a accessible unit complies with a policy requirement for a development of this scale. 10% of the units must be wheelchair accessible, and the site is accessible via lift up to the third floor.
Thank you.
Councillor Perks.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask about the balustrade. Just make sure my reading of the report's correct. So, as I understand it, the the previous application rejected the balustrade because it wasn't in keeping with the facade of the building. But am I right in understanding that the balustrade, which has been constructed, has been constructed in that way because it's compliant with building regulations and safety, and therefore we haven't got much choice about the balustrade because it has to be done in that way in order to be safe? Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, so yes. So the balustrade is the height that it is needed to be to meet building regulations. This is due to a difference in the floor height where those terraces are. Yeah, so we did refuse the previous application because the balustrade was considered to be harmful. However, when assessing the impact of external alterations to listed buildings and buildings within conservation areas, the harm to the significance of these heritage assets must be weighed against the benefits of the proposal. In this instance, we considered the use as holiday lets to be supported and a significant benefit of the proposal, and that this outweighs the harm to the heritage assets, and therefore we consider it to have overcome the reason for refusal on the previous applications. And this assessment is supported by the conservation officer, who commented recommending the application to be approved.
Okay, thank you.
Let me just check see if there's any other questions. Perhaps a slightly technical question for myself. The premises have been converted. They are being used currently without permission as holiday lets. Does that invalidate any form of insurance against personal harm, health and safety, etc., of the users of those, or do they sign some sort of opt-out clause that should the building catch fire and they fry, there's no back claim to the owners? I'm not a lawyer. I'm not familiar with this sort of this particular issue. But I just wondered whether, Joe, you've come across this, or Vicky, what the position is, having done all these works and are actively trading as holiday lets, what the situation is with insurance.
So I'm not an insurance expert, Chair, but I don't think whether they've got planning permission or not negates the need for them to fulfil all other different legislation in different areas. So
okay,
but I'm not sure.
Fine. Could I just check with the clerk, please, whether Councillor Fahy is with us? He requested to speak.
He is, Chair. He is.
He is. Fine. Would Councillor Fahy, now, as there are no other elected members wish to speak, would Councillor Fahy please make his comments with regard to this development?
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, colleagues. I'm here, Chair, to support the application. Members of the panel will know that the issues around Woolwich in terms of its viability has been challenging for a number of years. And the Equitable building is an iconic gateway into the Woolwich town centre. And both the developer and other developers within the town centre continue to be creative as to how they can maximise the opportunity for populating the area. And I think this application, despite its bumps and stops along the way, is achieving that objective. Investing something like £5 or £6 million in this iconic building over the years has been a tremendous boost to the town centre, and I very much hope that the panel will support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fahy. Any questions from members to Councillor Fahy? No, I don't see any. If that is the case, I would then ask the, sorry, one of my screens has been messing around all evening. I've now asked the developer's agent and or the applicant, Russell Clark, Gareth Higgins, to open their mics and give us their presentation. You have up to 15 minutes. Thank you.
Yes, good evening, Chair, member of the committee. My name is Russell Clark. I'm one of the 3 owners, or should I say custodians, of Equitable House. And first of all, I'd like to apologise for the nature of this planning application being retrospective. It wasn't our intention, and I believe that members will see from the planning history here, we've owned the building over a dozen years. We've submitted several planning applications and have always carried out our applications by the book, in front of any works, etc. This was a slightly different situation insofar as we applied for apartments on the building, at the top of the building, using very poor quality space, and it allowed us to do a lot of repairs. And we started carrying out the works to create the apartments. However, as this went ahead, we found that we were getting appraisals to market the properties, and for a number of reasons, delays to Crossrail, the market conditions, things weren't looking as rosy as we'd hoped, and consequently, if we'd have gone ahead with our original plans, we would have been at risk of breaching our financial covenants with our bankers. Obviously, something we couldn't allow to do. So we had to restructure everything, and needed to retain ownership, which is what we have done. And consequently, we've come up with a solution that involves letting the properties out in a viable way. And that's the reason, that's the only reason this is a retrospective application, because it only came to light after we started and carried out the works, and we're coming probably 3/4 of the way through the actual development. There are some alterations to the original application, but I think if you deal with a conversion of a building, especially a listed building, you only find out what you have when you strip everything down. That's very much the case of what we have here. Externally, the building is very, very much the same, apart from the balcony balustrading at the rear. What I'd say to you about the balcony balustrading at the rear is that it was probably an error in the original application for residential that it was shown slightly lower than it should have been. And so when we carried out the full drawings and we were, well progressed, we provided the information, the correct information, and this was shown as being 200 or 300 higher than the original drawings, and that's where on the previous planning application officers picked up that it was higher than previously consented. I'm going to show you a picture now, which is of the historical balustrading, which you should be able to see in here. It involved scaffolding poles of the height of what we're proposing. Now I'm trying to get that in front of the camera, hopefully I am. And you'll see that's what we replaced. So, hopefully we have carried out everything that we believe is right for this listed building, and tried not to abuse the situation. The other point I'd just like to make is that we actually carried out a lot of works to the existing structure of the building. We had significant problems with the structure of the building insofar as we had Regent Street disease, which was where water gets through the blockwork into the steel frame of the building. The steel frame corrodes and expands and blows and cracks all the Portland stone blockwork. We had a very poor roof, and we really needed to carry on very quickly with works to the roof, because we were suffering from leaks through the top. And I know with the specialist stonework people, I checked today, we had spent £170,000 on treatments to the external blockwork and maintenance on that. Just quickly, some pictures of the roof. This was what it was like. It had some very bashed in glass areas on it. This was internally where the water's coming through, and this was just a few instances. That's generally the type of accommodation that it consisted of. And when there was some furniture up there, we had a college in occupation at one time. This is the problems that they were putting up with. So clearly, it wasn't really usable space. It was very low quality. There was very few windows, etc. Finally, I would just say that the current use that's been proposed has been very, very helpful during the current pandemic, because of key workers have been staying and using it for temporary accommodation, and clearly it's in an excellent location for that, with the stations so nearby. So hopefully members will feel positively towards this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions to Russell Clark, please, from members of the committee. Any questions? I'm not seeing a welter of blue hands going up. Yes, I can see them now. Councillor Perks, please, followed by Councillor Mbang, and then Councillor Mardner.
Thank you, Chair. My question really, it just wants to probe a little further, Russell, if you don't mind, around the change to from residential to holiday lets. Your plans for residential, were they for sale or for letting?
Plans were for sale.
Yeah. And you're saying that the current market conditions are such that it's not viable to do that at the moment. Are you thinking that that might become something that's viable for the future?
Yes, I believe it may do. We were hoping for Crossrail to open, but obviously we've been sitting there waiting for that to happen for several years now. And we were hoping for that boost to the local market, yes.
So is it likely, if we agree this tonight, you may well be coming back in the future to change the classification again to sale?
Yeah, yes. I mean, it is a possibility. I mean, the trouble is, once you do one thing, you probably have got to carry on doing that for a period of time, because the changeover, you know, is a financial burden on you, because of you'll be back in there refitting it out, making it suitable for properties for sale, which is not the same as being suitable for holiday lets.
Okay, and is there a viable market for 9 properties which are mainly 3 bedrooms, if I remember? Is there a viable market for that, for holiday lets?
Yes, there is. It's currently operating as that, and is quite doing, you know, has decent occupancy. Obviously, occupancy has struggled everywhere. I mean, we've struggled with all of our tenants in the building over recent months. You can imagine we're not getting much rent out the pub at the moment. So, you know, things are difficult all round, but there is definitely a market for it.
Okay, right. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Can we, Councillor Mbang, please? If you could unmute.
Yeah, thank you. That's okay. Yes, apologies for, I was rushing from London Bridge, apologies. I just want to thank the presentation that I think we've just heard. I wanted to find out, being in a good location, anything creative definitely is something that is of advantage to our residents. I just wanted to know, was there any provision for kind of any safer or greener energy provision on the part of the rooftop? Is there any opportunity, or is there any communication with any nearby place to think about where people might do some parking? We know that we encourage people to use public transport, and it is by the train station, but you still will definitely keep people coming possibly in different directions, possibly with private cars. And lastly, disability access. Is there any provision also for that? If you can just possibly throw light on these 3 factors. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mbang. Back to you, Russell.
Well, the properties, as we know, were commenced as being built for residential purposes as individual units. So they met the requirements that we had to provide for that. They've got individual boiler systems in each unit, etc. They are 5-star, Green Star, and fully energy efficient as is required. So I didn't catch the last part. I didn't.
Yeah, the second part was whether there's any provision for at least some temporal parking, or even people who possibly come around the area. Whether what is there any provision? You know, in some cases, someone you might possibly be having conversation with nearby facilities that you'll be able to direct people if they have to even temporarily park. And the last one was about disability, whether there's disability access. Now that it's at the Vantage Place, one will expect that at least all categories of people will be possibly considered.
Yeah, I mean, we did spend in this development, we spent between £5 and £6 million carrying this work out. We changed so that they were DDA compliant to the offices that we have here, as well as the flats. We had those all refitted out. We have got there is an issue with some of these apartments in this building because of the drainage. So we've had to have raised floors within the apartments, and that's why we meet the requirement for one apartment being DDA compliant, and not all of them, because of the raised floors that we have to deal with drainage. It's a listed building, you know, we do have some construction problems here. With regard to packing, do you mean backpacking? I didn't really understand.
I'm speaking about and people coming possibly to use the facility, for instance. What is parking? Where will they parking of like cars, for instance?
Oh, parking.
Yes.
Well, there is very limited, and there always has been very limited. Obviously, the council, the DLR was built. Access to this part of the road is restricted. We had land. Well, this building had land taken away from it for parking. When we purchased it, it had the land that it had. We have the ability to park a couple of cars on our driveway bit near the bins are, but we keep them for ourselves, not for, we haven't given them for use with the hotel. So there isn't really anything I can do about that. The spaces I've got would not be DDA compliant anyway, because massive great gates have to be opened. And so obviously it wouldn't be suitable for disabled. Yeah, I mean,
But in case of any emergency, we are able to get emergency cars into the area, for instance, too. That's what I just wanted to.
Oh yeah, yes, indeed, yeah, we can.
Okay.
And also, I mean, the fire element, we've carried out significant works for the fire. We've put a dry riser in the building, which the building needed anyway. Which, you know, we have done everything we've done. We've made sure that it is fully compliant.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gary Dillon, please. Are you with us, Gary? He's frozen on my screen. You're back with us.
Yeah. I'm here for some reason.
It froze. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
You have a question, please.
Yes. Hi, Russell. You mentioned the company's financial situation and the uncertainty around Crossrail. I'm wondering why you've opted for short-term holiday lets rather than residential letting, which may have given you more financial security over a longer period of time whilst Crossrail sorts itself out. And my second question is, as you have one apartment adapted for disabled accommodation, I'm wondering what contingencies you've got for evacuation should there be a fire. How would somebody with disability get out of the building from the top floor?
Okay. The reason for the short-term letting, the units up there are 3-bedroom generally, and they don't really stack up for letting out as AST longer-term lets. The rental income would not warrant them working that way very well. So that's the main reason. The disabled, we had a full consultants that provided us with the fire risk assessment and fire strategy on the building. This is a very substantial building, solid concrete floors. All the party walls are firewalls, etc. If there is a problem, a fire within the building, a disabled person will be able to stay in their apartment and fortunately be relatively safe. We haven't clad it with fire, something that's going to burn down on the outside or anything. So the fire generally is going to be contained within whichever unit it commences in, and hopefully the fire brigade will have come and sorted things out before there is a significant problem because we've got 2-hour fire breaks between all the units.
Gary, does that answer your question?
I suppose it does, Chair. You know, without looking at building controls details. Yeah.
Thank you. Last question at the moment would be Councillor Mardner, please, Clive.
I think the question was hinted to in terms of Councillor Perk's question, but just a little bit more details. It seemed like to me that these holiday flats are sort of a plan B because of the changes in the market. But we need a little bit more surety in terms of property and access to homes. You gave the indication that we may be doing this holiday letting for some time, but I probably want to get a better idea of sort of a long-term plan on this, Russell, if that's possible.
Well, yeah, I mean, our intention was to create the residential units and sell them. In having carried out the financial viabilities when we were quite the way through the development, having spent quite a bit more money than an eye-wateringly amount of money sorting the building out, we found that we were going to have problems with doing that by realizing the financial situation that we had and selling the units. So we had to come up with a plan B. As you're right, it is a plan B, and I anticipate that we may well go back to plan A at some point in the future. But the trouble is, we have to just keep an eye on that. I mean, essentially, I'm not sure that, that there should be an issue between the two uses. Apparently, well, clearly residential was an acceptable use because it was granted planning permission. When I look at the location here, I think that the holiday, the short-term rental use, ideally located for it in the town centre, that should be an acceptable use. So yes, if we have to come back and we decide that the financial position has changed so that we can go ahead with plan A, then we will do that. But I can't tell you when that will be because of, well, if I could predict the economic future, I'd be really rich. I mean,
really rich or just rich?
Really rich.
Right. Okay. I'll just thank you, Clive, for those the questions and other members. Just before we go on to let's go on to our debate now, please. And thank you very much, Russell, for answering those questions so fully. I don't see any other. Oh, sorry, I've missed Councillor Gardner out. I'm sorry. Off you go, David.
It's okay. I was just going to speak on the debate. I just raised my hand to speak in the debate, not to ask.
Okay, right, fine, thank you. Okay, Russell, you're off the hook again. Thank you very much. Right, folks, let's open this up to the debate. The same rules apply as I said earlier on. All other members present in the meeting, if they could maintain a bit of quiet while we discuss this application. Thank you very much. First comments, please, from anyone. David, you had your hand up. It's now disappeared off the screen.
No, I'll open up. So
Okay.
thank you, Chair. I think having looked at the documentation and heard the evidence, I do think on balance we should support this application. I think it's regrettable, but the applicant has expressed his own remorse that the original approval wasn't followed for the exterior, but we are where we are, and it is really important that at the heart of Woolwich, and this is perhaps one of the most, with the town hall and so forth, one of the most iconic buildings at the heart of Woolwich, that really really underpins General Gordon Square. I do think we've got to have a vibrant and successful building. and clearly the applicant has reached the view that this formula works best to secure their return on investment, and clearly also in terms of our local plan, while many of us would have preferred to have residential accommodation, particularly 3-bedroom residential accommodation, which is desperately needed in Woolwich, that there is also a need for high quality accommodation for visitors and tourists for short-term holiday lets. Apart hotels are increasingly popular format for people visiting, and therefore on balance I think we should support the application.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Fletcher, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree with Councillor Gardner. I think that as I said on the last application, it's always a red flag for me when we get a retrospective application. But I was pleased to hear the applicant provide an explanation and also to note that this is not the way that they normally proceed, and explain the reason for that. I think it's perfectly reasonable, and equally for something to have proceeded in one direction and then changed, I think it's understandable why that was done. So I think that the way that it's been converted, it's not a case of this being done simply without consent. As we were told earlier, there was a consent in place for something very similar, and that wasn't then actioned. So I think it's slightly misleading in how it initially strikes you that it's a retrospective application without consent. So, but for all the reasons that Councillor Gardner outlined, I think that it's a perfectly reasonable use for the building. It's obviously come on a long way since I think in 2012 I stood on the top of the building to help light a beacon for the Jubilee, and it certainly must have come on a long way since then, because it was looking a little shabby, I think, at that time. But I think increasingly people are going for holiday lets, and I think even in the current climate, they are perhaps more COVID secure than hotels as well. So I think possibly that's a good thing. And also it doesn't preclude in future a potential conversion into residential. Would seem to be fairly straightforward. So I think for all those reasons, it's obviously a quality development, and I'm happy to support the officer recommendation.
My machine keeps muting. Thank you very much. I think the last person indicating they want to speak is Councillor Mardner, Clive.
Chair, everything I wanted to say has already been said. I'm happy to go to the vote, Chair.
Thank you very much. The only person who hasn't spoken so far who wants to is me. I mean, I was initially, when I read this, Russell, fairly hostile, I must admit. But having heard, like my other colleagues this evening, your very coherent explanation of why you were working like that, and also as someone who's worked in the commercial sector myself for a long time with my own company, understand the pressures that do go on, not in a building structure, but in a totally different sector, but do that. And also people saying they're becoming more popular. I mean, I think it's a matter of London catching up, because flatels, as they're called in Paris and in Brussels and other places, are incredibly, I mean, we used one when we were looking for accommodation in Brussels to live there permanently. We used one for some months, and it was very, very, and we had a 4-month-old with us. It was very, very suitable accommodation to use. So I say I've changed my mind, and let's go to the vote. And before I ask Clark to do that, can I please ask the Clerk, I did get my words in the wrong order just prior to this, with these Zoom meetings. Could the Clerk please, before he asks the member which way they're voting, which is either to agree or not agree or abstain with the proposal in front of us, whether they had lost any form of communication. We have lost one member earlier on, and so they won't be voting anyway. But if I can now hand over to the Clerk, please.
Okay, I'll start with Councillor Dillon. Did you lose connection at any point during the item?
No.
Are you for, against, or abstaining on the officer's recommendations?
For. I didn't get a chance to make a comment there, but what I was going to say was it's interesting, the assessment of the market by the applicant, and it's something that we should note.
Thank you.
Councillor Lacal, did you lose connection at any point during the item?
No, I didn't.
Are you for, against, or
And
abstaining?
I'm for.
Councillor Fletcher, did you lose connection at any point during that item?
Not on this occasion, no.
Okay. Are you for, against, or abstaining on the officer's recommendations?
I'm for the recommendation.
Councillor Mardiner, did you lose connection at all during the item?
No, I didn't.
Are you for, against, or abstaining?
For, thank you.
Councillor Perks, did you lose connection at all during the application?
No, I didn't.
Are you for, against, or abstaining on the officer's recommendations? And Councillor Brain, did you lose connection at all?
I did not lose connection at all, and I am for the recommendations.
Okay, I have 6 votes for, none against, and none abstaining.
You didn't actually record my vote.
No, I think you're missing off my screen, David, as well.
Sorry, Councillor Gardner, did you lose connection at all?
No.
And are you
I'm for.
Okay, brilliant. That's 7 votes for, 0 against, and none abstaining.
Right, the recommendations are carried unanimously, I think. So thank you very much, everyone, on that item. Please don't go home yet. We've got another one on the agenda, item 7. Thank you, Russell and colleague. We bid you
Already
good night.
at home, Chair.
Sorry? Sorry, I missed that.
We're already at home.
Yes, well, yes, I know. We might, well, some people might be. I am, yeah. But so, yes, those who are at home can rush off and do whatever they want to do now. But thank you very much for your attendance. And let's move on now, please, to item 7. And I believe we have a couple of people waiting to speak on that one who are not just the presenting of the proposal or and the agent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. This application is for 38 Wellington Street in Woolwich. The applicant seeks planning permission for the change of use of the lower ground floor to include Class D1 use to the already consented A3, A4, B2 and B1 uses, with the installation of a partial mezzanine floor and associated external alterations to include the provision of 2 new entrances, the introduction of bollards and ramps on Wellington Street and Polytechnic Street, and the removal of brick panels to provide additional windows. The site is situated on the northern side of Wellington Street on the junction with Polytechnic Street and measures approximately 1,218 square metres in size. The site is also located within the Woolwich Conservation Area and the Woolwich Town Centre, which is a designated major centre. The Grade 2 star listed Town Hall also adjoins the site to the north and to the west. The existing mixed-use building was approved in 2015 and includes an addition of 34 units on the upper floors. Earlier this year, there have been also multiple approvals over the site, including some additional residential units within the first floor along Polytechnic Street near the rear. There are currently 2 similar applications as this proposal over the site. Both have been appealed. One application is subject to a non-determination appeal, and the second application was refused by officers earlier this year and then appealed. The latter application included 3 reasons for refusal, which related to the lack of details around pupil numbers, outdoor space, plant and air conditioning units, and the location of the proposed cycle parking was considered unacceptable as it was within the residential car park of the building. The current application has been considered and is considered to overcome these reasons for refusal. The application has undergone public consultation and received 2 objections. It is noted in the report, it does say 1 objection in the summary. However, there are 2 objections which have been addressed throughout the report. The designing out crime officer from the Metropolitan Police has objected, and Councillor Fahy has objected and has requested the application be heard at committee. The application is recommended for approval. The ground floor is already approved for A3, A4 and D2 uses when the residential building was initially approved. In 2018, a B1 use was also approved for the ground floor. This proposal relates to the use of the ground floor for an educational space, including the construction of an internal mezzanine floor, which would increase the existing floor space within that ground unit by 337 square metres. And in doing so, it creates an independent lower ground floor and an upper ground floor, all connected internally. The education facility proposes to operate between 7 AM to 9 PM Monday to Friday and 9 AM to 3 PM on Saturdays. These proposed operating hours are less than the approved A3, A4 and D2 uses initially approved in this space. The education facility would provide a varied educational offer, including before and after school care, tuition and alternate provision education. The operation of the college requires on-site preparation of hot food and therefore plant associated with the discharge of pollution is also proposed to be installed. A maximum capacity of 60 students have been proposed on site at any one time. 16 cycle parking spaces are also proposed on the lower ground floor and would be accessed via Polytechnic Street. The Woolwich Town Centre Master Plan SPD identifies that the site falls within Woolwich's municipal education quarter, as it has a unified clusters of civic and educational buildings which span the Victorian, Edwardian and interwar periods. The principle of the D1 use has been discussed within the committee report, and officers consider that the principle of the proposal is acceptable, subject to the recommended conditions outlined in the report. The Council's Education Department have reviewed the proposal against government guidance for such facilities and supports the proposed education facility. The Metropolitan Police Designing Out Crime Officer has reviewed the scheme and has objected on the basis that the proposal lacks sufficient details to demonstrate a safe and secure environment, and owing to the location of the site within the highly connected Woolwich Town Centre. It is noted that the principle of the educational use has been accepted from a planning perspective, and it would be up to future occupiers of the building to ensure that the facility is operated in a manner which discourages and limits antisocial behaviour, as mentioned earlier, and keeps the occupiers safe. The objection highlighted the benefit of providing defensible space between the property boundary and the building entrance points. However, in this instance, owing to the constraints of the site, this is not possible. A recommended condition of approval, which was proposed by the Crime Prevention Officer, should the Council proceed with a recommendation for approval, has been included to ensure secure by design standards are met within the internal layout and that windows and doors are designed appropriately. External alterations proposed to the existing building consist of the creation of an existing entrance along Wellington Street and Polytechnic Streets, with the construction of bollards in front. It is proposed to cover the ground floor windows with a curtain wall. A glass panel is to be replaced above the residential entrance on Wellington Street for an air intake vent associated with the proposed ventilation system, and an extraction system is proposed at roof level. Officers consider that the proposed external alterations to the building are minor, as the design of the entrances, the air vent, roof plant and curtain walls match the style of the existing building and are not considered to be visually harmful and will not cause harm to the setting of the Grade 2 star listed town hall. It is noted that a majority of these external works have already been completed, the applicant assures me that the use has not commenced itself. In terms of residential amenity, the alterations proposed to the elevations are not considered to impact, in terms of residential amenity, the proposed alterations in the use are not considered to impact on the adjoining occupants' residential amenity in terms of overlooking and the loss of privacy over and above any impact that was deemed acceptable from the consented upper floor units and the previous consents within this unit. That is the end of my presentation. Members are requested to consider the office's recommendation for approval.
You're on mute, Stephen.
It keeps doing this evening. I don't know why. Okay.
Chair, sorry.
Members' questions.
Chair, sorry. Could I raise a point of order?
Of course.
I didn't ask this at the beginning, but I did object to and appeared at the planning board to object to the original consent for the building. Can I take advice on whether I should withdraw on that basis? I think it was in 2014, 2015.
Right. Okay. Vicky, could I have? Do you want to have a word?
So was that for the original redevelopment?
It was the consent for the demolition of the building and the consent for the building that's there now.
So that's been implemented. This is I mean, I'm obviously not legally qualified, but this is a fresh application before you, provided you're open-minded. I mean, I'm unclear of what the nature of your objections were for the 2014 scheme.
Well, it was the I objected to the quality of design and the demolition of the existing building. But as you say, I just wanted to check that because I think,
yeah,
as you say, this is a very different application. It's dealing with what's there already. But
yeah, I think that objection is parked with that development that was given permission. It's been implemented. This is about the use. So I provided you're open-minded, you've not expressed an opinion on the use in this application, then I think it would be fine to carry on.
Thank you. No, I haven't. So I'm content to continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky. I would be minded also that it is a separate, it is a separate matter, and welcome Councillor Fletcher's open-minded approach on this. Right, I've got some hands going up in the air here. Excuse me, I'm talking too much today. Councillor Gardner, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. My first question is around, it really follows on from what Councillor Fletcher was saying, that when this originally had permission, there was an undertaking from the applicants that they would be, you know, a concession to the history and heritage of the Grand Theatre, the Woolwich Grand Theatre, and there would be some community space which could be used for dramatic, creative purposes, which would be open to the public. That seems to have disappeared somewhere down the line. I don't think it's part of this application, but it would be useful to have that explanation because I think that was the deal that was made with the public originally. And my second question is around the area immediately outside. There's no reference here to the public realm. There's reference to the pedestrian environment, but I just wondered what greening, if there are going to be a lot of people using the ground floor, is there greenery, benches, planting and so forth? There's no mention of biodiversity. Is there anything that can be done to improve the area of the public realm immediately outside, and anything in terms of widening the pavement in Polytechnic Street, and there is a wide pavement in Wellington Street, but making it a more welcoming environment, because at the moment it's just paved and there might be a tree there, but it is a rather sterile environment, and wondered about that. Thank you.
Thank you. So in regards to the first point about the loss of the original use on the site, as part of the original approval for the building, there was a legal agreement which required, which gave approval for a D2 use on the site, as well as A3 and A4 uses. There was a clause in there, and this is addressed in the committee report, that says that after 2 years, if it's the property's been, the space has been marketed, only then the A3 or the A4 uses will be implemented. We have had legal advice from the council's legal team in regards to how this application, as it's a brand new use which isn't referenced within this legal agreement, and they've come back and said that this application has to be assessed as a brand new use on the site. There's no real connection between that legal agreement and this use. And I will note as well, as part of the 2018 approval, there was offices approved within the site as well. Both applications have provided marketing evidence saying why the uses aren't, the previous uses, the D2, the A3 and the A4 aren't suitable on the site. I'm sure the applicant can develop on this a bit more for you. In regards to, sorry?
No, carry on.
In regards to the public realm, as part of this proposal, there hasn't been anything from the applicant to request any greenery. Again, it's if we can ask the applicant if they'd be willing to look at any of that. There is a small part of, as you can probably see in the plans, that just outside the building entrance, it is private property, and then it goes, there's a small section of private property before it goes to the footpath as well. But in regards to the public realm, upgrading that it wouldn't be a requirement that I would see that we'd have to implement as part of this recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next question, please. Councillor, excuse me, Councillor Cow.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to find out, because the floors above that are residential properties, is there appropriate soundproofing? I mean, I'm not sure when people bought their flats whether they were aware that there would be an educational provision below. So what mitigation is in place?
On the original approval, there was a requirement to implement some type of sound insulation between the two units. I will note that the approved uses include an A3 and an A4 use, so particularly a pub, which I would suspect to create a lot more noise, particularly late at night. There's approvals until about 2 a.m. Sorry, 12:30 a.m. on some days already on the site. So I would say that the proposed educational use will have a lesser impact than what's approved on the site at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher, please.
Sorry, I wasn't indicating, Chair.
Oh, sorry, must have been still up there. Councillor Perks, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Matt. Good evening. Just a couple of questions. Would you mind going back to the photograph of the outside? Because I'm sorry, but I can't quite envisage what the proposals are for the outside in terms of the balustrade and the screening wall, I think it's called.
Just sharing this now.
Thank you.
So that's the picture how it has been for until most recent times. As I said, the works have been completed. I will go to the next. So there are some bollards. So this is Polytechnic Street here. The ground floor. There's a couple of bollards proposed.
Yeah.
Outside the entrances of the door. So that's just to make sure people, if they're walking past, are aware that that door does open outwards. These bollards are within the private property as well. So this line here, I believe, is the limitation of the application site and is not the footpath itself. That's another extent of space.
And the screening wall, I don't understand that, I'm afraid.
So the curtain wall, I believe that's just an internal wall near the windows, which sits within it. The applicant might be able to expand.
Okay, I'll ask the applicant. While you've got that up, well, this is my second question. Would you mind just talking? It's too hard to see that on my screen. Would you mind just talking us through the gist of that layout? Because I can't see it from here, I'm afraid.
So this layout will be indicative should members approve the recommendation, as they will have to address the design, secure design requirements. So this may change, but over in the bottom left here, that's multi-purpose space used for dining and other activities internally to the site. The kitchen is adjacent to it there. This is the main entrance to the site along Wellington Street. There's a lift as well for disabled access to get onto the different levels. There's a reception area here with a couple offices and I believe administration desks. Over here, there's a large classroom and there's a few other classrooms on this ground floor as well, varying size. There's bathrooms over here with a few private offices or breakout spaces. The mezzanine layout is this one to the right. It again includes mainly different classrooms. I believe some of these can be made smaller or larger as required. This bottom left area is a void, so that is an open area that looks down into the multi-purpose space where people would be maybe doing some other activities or having the food provided. And then so it's on the ground floor, sorry I missed. The cycle parking is located along the Polytechnic Street. The entrance is through the bin store, which is located there as well.
Okay. And is there another void on the mezzanine which is near that C? Is that a void as well, or is that just another classroom or an open area?
Here, that's the plant room.
Oh, right. Okay. Right. Thank you very much. That's helpful. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Matthew. Right, if we go back to our usual Celebrity Squares box, please. Right, let me just get my... So my iPad is not liking Zoom at all tonight. I've lost all my hand.
Councillor Dillon.
Thank you very much. I can't get my blue hand screen back up. So, Councillor Dillon, fire away for the officer, please.
The day, I mean, I'm looking at section 5.4 all the way down to 5.8. There's quite a wide age range for people attending the school, and the school day looks pretty fragmented from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. at night, and also operating 6 days a week. I'm going to ask the applicant what type of education is going to be on offer there, but with such a fragmented day and such a wide age group, there's going to be a lot of toing and froing. of people coming and going, especially if you've got 7-year-old kids that are going to be there from 7 a.m. till whenever it is they've got to go to their own schools. And I'm just wondering how we've made an assessment of not having much impact on the residents that have actually purchased the properties on the floors above.
Thank you. So the application is limited to 60 students maximum. So if throughout the day that amount considered to any office use, if that was an office or a pub or something else, it's quite similar. If it was a education use for within the hundreds, there may be other requirements, or it may not be acceptable. But just because it's been limited to 60 students, we consider it to be acceptable. And considering it is located within the town centre location, where there are a variety of uses that operate all different hours, and it is located right across from the Woolwich Centre as well, which has a lot of people coming in and going.
Yeah, but not above. Okay, Gary, does that answer your question?
Not really, because like I say, you look at our schools around the borough and you look at our education facilities, I don't think there's many that have residential dwellings above. Like I say, some of my questions will be towards the applicant about what is actually going to be offered there. So
thank you very much. Councillor Mbang, please. Dominic.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just wondered if you can possibly just mention the concerns that were raised by the police and Councillor Fahy, and whether the application has actually addressed those concerns. If you were able to just comment on that, please. Thank you.
At this stage, Dominic, I wouldn't ask the officers to comment on the comments of the objections of the police and Councillor Fahy, but I would ask you to wait to question them once they've both spoken.
All right. Okay.
If that's okay for you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's fine.
Right. Okay. I don't see any other questioners indicating they wish to speak at the moment, in which case I would like to take firstly the questions or comments, please, from the representation from Metropolitan Police. Do I have someone from the...
He is in attendance. No, I think he's left, Chair.
He's left. Okay.
Is it, am I the representative for the Met Police?
Yes.
Oh, well, councillors, welcome. I wasn't expecting to speak, to be honest. I was just sitting on my predecessor, Rob, commented on the scheme. I'm aware of it because I did the secure by design element of it on the residential side of it. So our concern is putting an educational site below that residential site. Is the educational element able to offer the same security that a normal educational site would be able to provide, in terms of we've got serious gang violence and antisocial behaviour within a very high crime area of Woolwich, and therefore can we still maintain that with the proposed scheme that we've got? And under the current proposal, we don't feel that there is, but it really depends on the age group of what's going to be implemented. So it very much depends on what's going to be implemented. We're very keen to work with what the proposal will be. We don't, support or deny. We just work with what is proposed or accepted by the councillors. But we are concerned that it's a very high crime profile that we're then building an educational centre in. And have we got the foot space and the facilities to be able to really properly provide that. Or it was felt very much for us, it was an afterthought in terms of they couldn't get the commercial space they wanted, and therefore this is an afterthought in terms of let's make an educational space. I apologise, I'm not as articulate or as well versed in making my points in terms of what's right or wrong in terms of these instances, but we are concerned because it is a high crime area. We have high gang violence, we have conflict of youth violence, and therefore an educational element below residential without the defensible space around it to make sure that our young people are safe, it is a concern. You know, so that was really our guys on that. The residential above is absolutely fine. The integration of that is my concern, and how that educational facility within Woolwich is properly implemented.
Thank you very much for those comments. Questions, please, to our representative from the Met, please. I've got one indicated, which is Councillor Mardner, please.
Thank you. You raised a couple of issues for me with your statement. You said it depends on the age group. Could you say a little bit more about what age group will offer, or the most problem and the one with the least problems? And secondly, could you say to us what you think would be the best, what needs to be put in place to make you as Metropolitan feel safe that matters are taken on board?
Thank you, Clive. Realistically, we're talking about a younger age group. If it's a younger age group, then in terms of crime, in terms of gang culture, in terms of drugs, in terms of all the ancillary problems that Central Woolwich has, that's not going to be a problem. If it's well policed, if we've got good management from the school. These problems do exist in primary school, sadly, but it's more of a secondary school problem or a college facility. So there would need to be very good management strategies around there, how they're going to protect their young adults around those very strong cultures within Woolwich. So that's the age group I'm looking at. It's definitely the teenagers, and from very young teenagers, probably slightly below in terms of secondary school, 11, 12-year-olds, up to 18, 19-year-olds that need to be supported in that educational facility. And that may be more of an management practice, and the educational facilities are provided because it's a smaller educational facility. So the client or the applicant may well be provided answers to those questions, but it's not something to be ignored. I cannot reiterate enough how important this is for Woolwich in terms of making sure all of those facilities are in place. And I can help in terms of the physical security of that premises, but actually as a premises, it's got none. You know, it's a very, very small footprint. So it's got the potential to be very problematic if we don't put very good management strategies in place. Sorry, Clive, what was your second point?
Well, just what you talked in some sense about it. You talked about the management practices, and what I probably want to get is a little bit more of what that means. So would you expect the applicant to come to you and say, these are our plans to keep this age group safe? Or would it be for you as Metropolitans to say, well, what are you doing? I just need to know which way around that goes and how that normally happens.
Well, often, if you're proposing a new school or educational facility, they would go into planning, and there'd be a planning condition to achieve secure by design standards. But that's only the physical security of that premises. So that stops burglary, criminal damage, antisocial behaviour if there's the potential for it. What I'm concerned in with this facility is the environs of where we're putting it in, and therefore is it the right context to be putting that facility in there? And if it is, then you can't achieve that with the built environment. You can't do that with a door and a window to stop burglary. That's not the problem we're facing here. We're looking at potentially vulnerable adults or young adults being placed in a situation where you've got gangs hanging outside the front doors, but there's no physical boundary to them. There's no playground, there's no fencing, there's no perimeter to that. So they are very much going in and out of a facility where they need to be secure in those environments. And therefore, yeah. Do you see
Thank you very much.
No, carry on, I understand. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor, next, the only other person I can see wishes to speak is Councillor Avril.
You're on mute.
Sorry, Chair. I think you've covered most of it, but I just wanted to know if you wanted to tell us a little bit more about concerns on safeguarding, because I do understand the concerns around the perimeter, but what other concerns would you have? I saw comments you had on safeguarding. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us?
No, I think that's pretty much it. We can't control what happens within the actual facility because that's just down to good teaching, good management, good principles. So we can't, as police, have any input in on that. What I'm concerned on is that the right facility? Have they got the landmass, the grounds, the physical environs to actually provide a very safe and important environment for our young adults? Or are we looking at a facility that hasn't been able to gain other usage and therefore is looking at that as an option? I understand that Woolwich needs educational facilities, but you know, I don't necessarily have an opinion on what's right or wrong. I'm concerned, and we as the police are concerned in terms of being able to provide all the right safeguards for the people that use the facility. And that really does depend on the age group, that depends on the management practices, that depends on the physical security measures they're going to put into that ground floor. And it depends on what catchment we're going to look at, who are we looking at to educate from that facility.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Councillor Perks.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to carry on in the same vein, really. I've just gone back to the conditions, and there is a condition about secure by design. And I just in case you've not seen it or you've not got it in front of you, it talks about no development shall commence on site until details of security measures have been submitted and approved in writing by a local planning authority, which will be in line with the standards set out by Secure by Design. And also, it can't be occupied until door and window products meet the standards recommended by Secure by Design. So are you saying that in itself is not sufficient because there are other matters that would need to be covered?
Councillor Perks, thank you very much for your input, and thank you for some of the other projects where you've made really valuable comments that I couldn't comment upon. That's really tricky. As the Met Police, we are obviously very sensitive about what comments we do and do not make. And we don't want to prevent buildings from being made that need to be made, where we're not necessarily best versed to make those comments. I would love to say if they achieve Secure by Design, it would be a very successful development. I'm probably not best placed, and there are planning officers that are probably much better placed to make those comments. I just am genuinely concerned as a police officer of 20 years experience that educational facility may not be best placed in that environment because of the pressures that is under from all the surrounding environs that it is in. It's a very high crime area. We have very serious crime. We have very serious violent crime. Therefore, I can just say I'm concerned as an individual. I can say I'm concerned on behalf of the MPS. But if they put in very good management practices, if they have very good strategies around who they are going to educate and the guardians that they're going to educate them from, then I'm sure it can absolutely work. My concern is just in the terms of they don't necessarily have the build, layout, design, built environs to provide what I would like for young adults if they are vulnerable. They just don't have it. You go straight from the high street straight into that environment, so you cannot pass those potentially hostile environments to go into that place of education for a small number of students, and therefore in that town centre environment we are concerned, and therefore there may be an ancillary spill of youth violence in those cases.
Thank you, Steve. Could I now ask, thank you very much for those detailed responses. Could I now ask Councillor Fahy, who has also objected or wishes to speak? I don't know whether you're objecting or not. I think he is listed as an objector. If you could please, Councillor Fahy. John.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll be as brief as I can, mindful of the lateness of the hour. I was a bit miffed when I read paragraph 6.6.1, where it was suggested that I hadn't explained my position with regard to this development, and frankly I've been doing it for the last 5 years, so the officers may be fully aware of it, or maybe simply ignored it, putting it like that. Really, the officer has put it extremely well in terms of the educational facility, and I'm just miffed that the Director of Children's Services agreed to support this application, and there's no evidence whatsoever of the demand in respect of this facility, mindful of the educational opportunities that exist around the Woolwich area in any case. Councillor Gardner mentioned at the outset the fact that the commercial space, the fact that the community space had been argued over and over and over, and had been ignored both by officers of the council and by the applicant. In terms of the commercial space, there's been ample opportunity for the applicants to promote this business in terms of the commercial space available, mindful of the fact that we have ongoing developments, particularly Spray Street, whereby commercial organizations are being moved and could adequately be provided with opportunities into this space, should that be possible. So therefore, I think, Chair, what has happened effectively, and I was interested in the comment made by the officer on a point raised by one of the panel members, that they'd sought legal advice. Now, I suspect if you ask a question and you want to get the legal advice you want, well, that's the question you'll ask. And it doesn't seem to me that in all sense that has been appropriate. And I think what's been happening, and the final point I wanted to make, is that the developer has been drip feeding their proposals over the years. If they fail on one, they put in another. If they fail on that, they put in another. And what they're hoping to do, I guess, at some point in time, is simply persuade everybody that the game's up and we should give them everything they want. And I think, Chair, I would suspect, bearing in mind you and your panel, that you will address those points vigorously. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fahy. Do I have any questions from members of our committee to Councillor Fahy? Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair. I was going to ask this question of the officer, actually, but I'll just ask Councillor Fahy, whether anyone has actually seen, other than officers, have seen this apparent legal advice, and anyone ever saw the marketing analysis that was done, and secondly, whether the applicant has been in regular touch with you as the ward councillor.
No, that isn't the case, but I am familiar with organisations that have made approaches to the applicant for the use of the commercial space, which has been seen to be extraordinarily prohibitive, particularly mindful of the area in which this building sits.
Thank you very much. Right. If we have no further questions to Councillor Fahy, I would ask that the applicant now speak, and that's the agent for the agent Chris Blenderleith and Janice Bird. If you could unmute your microphones, please, that'd be great. You've got up to 15 minutes max.
Thank you, Chair. And obviously, I've been listening to the debate, and I will endeavour to try and answer the questions. Obviously, there were several questions, so please, if I don't get to them, then please point them out, and we'll try and answer. I will deal with town and country planning matters, and Janice Bird of SUMAS, who's sort of very well experienced in education, and will deal with many of the operational points. And I think one of the important points that was raised was in connection with the management. And I think that this is an application which will have a sort of user mentioned, which is unusual in town and country planning, but in this instance it was deemed to be appropriate by officers, and we supported that approach. So I think that much depends in terms of management on Janice Bird, and she can present her credentials to you for your sort of consideration. Dealing with a number of points before going on and giving my presentation, then sort of obviously Councillor Leku mentioned the issue of sound insulation and mitigation, and in fact the standard of sound mitigation, because we did get approval for an A3, A4 use, is far higher than one would normally expect in a building, and therefore it is very well suited to an education use, but perhaps is more limited in terms of the hours. So hopefully that gives you comfort in terms of the sort of sound installation and in terms of the relationship between residential and the education use. In terms of Councillor Gardner, in terms of the Grand Theatre and the community use, I think that the intention is to continue the community use. I think that the applicant, I noticed the concerns raised by Councillor Fahy in relation to the use, but it has proved very difficult, as the marketing report does explain, which is on the in with the application and can be seen with the application. But at the end of the day, in terms of that particular exercise, in terms of this particular application, I think that we've got to consider the application in the round, and that's both in terms of the use and in terms of the sort of issues. I think that we tried to achieve the A3 uses, but in the current market, it's even more difficult. With COVID-19 having closed down many restaurants, I think we're going to lose a lot more restaurants and a lot more pubs. And it's just made the whole exercise even more difficult. In terms of the Councillor Burke's, in terms of the sort of brick panels, it is in fact removal of brick panels to provide additional. So hopefully that clarifies that particular point. In terms of other points, Janice comment on those points if she would. She will speak after me. I suppose in terms of background, I've worked in the field of mental health now as a town planner for over 30 years and faced with many of the issues in relation to those facilities. And that's included providing school facilities for children and young adults with social, emotional and behavioural needs. I have a daughter who works for social service and works in child protection. I've got one of my children attended Red Rose in Lancashire because they had dyslexia. Their behaviour at school before moving to Red Rose was described as disruptive. It's for this reason that I elected to speak to you today as the chairman of Leith Planning, because I feel that I've got a lot of experience and I'm more than happy to talk to you and more than happy to answer questions. The need for more schools offering special support to children with social, emotional and behavioural difficulties is well documented. The Timpson Review of School Exclusion in 2018 stated that despite the dedication of many settings that offer education after exclusion, there is much variation in the quality of the offer, with alternative provision being one of the viable options. There's not enough support to attract high quality subject specialist staff, investing in good facilities, or remove the stigma attached to being educated in those settings. So that was the Timpson Review in 2018. And thankfully, the government has committed to implementing Timpson's call to promote the role of alternative provision. This includes recognising the best institutions as teaching schools so they can share best practice across the wider system. This is something which SUMAS Woolwich, alongside Nurture UK, are aiming to achieve. Once operational, SUMAS intend to seek a Centre of Excellence status. This would allow Nurture UK to use the facilities for bespoke on-site teacher training services in order to create better support to attract the higher quality subject specialist staff to which Timpson was referring. This application involves extending the permitted use of the lower ground floor and mezzanine at 38 Wellington Street to include an educational facility class D1 of the use classes order. SUMAS Woolwich will be a new purpose-built educational facility which will cater, as we've heard, for children aged 7 to 18. It will offer a range of educational services to the community throughout the week. By day, the school will operate as an alternative provision facility. It will offer special educational services to students with a high degree of social, emotional and behavioural needs and who have been excluded from mainstream education. They will offer a private tuition service after school and on Saturday mornings. The school will receive pupils both on a temporary and permanent on-roll exclusion, hence the need to register it as an independent school. We've worked with officers closely in recent months to reach the point that officers are able to support this application. I've read the comments of the Metropolitan Police Design Act crime officer. The officer questioned the suitability of Woolwich city centre for such a facility and concerned that it will be a focal point for recruiting new gang members. However, this facility is part of the solution, not part of the problem. The alternative is a society where we turn our back on these children, a society where we pay the price when children become adults with social, emotional and behavioural needs, adults with no education and little opportunity, where crime and gang culture are seen as the only real alternatives. SUMAS Woolwich is not an answer to all of society's needs. However, SUMAS Woolwich will be an important asset within the community. SUMAS Woolwich is an important service within the wider education system. Woolwich needs to provide for those children within the community with social, emotional and behavioural needs. They cannot and should not be ignored, nor should they be shipped out somewhere else. I'm pleased that this application was called in for determination by members. I believe it provides an opportunity to state that this committee recognises the need for alternative provision, that this committee supports the work and aspirations of SUMAS, that this committee believes that Woolwich can be a centre of excellence in this field. I would invite this planning committee to approve this application, not because officers recommend that consent be granted, because it is the right thing to do. At that point, I'd like to introduce, if I may, Janice Bird, who's got considerable experience in this field and has dedicated much of her life to actually catering for the needs of these children. Janice, if you would, please.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. A little bit about my credentials and what has brought me to this point. I've been a head teacher since 2008, and I've been teaching for 27 years now. I'm currently an executive head teacher in Hackney and oversee 5 settings, which covers 1,500 children, and I've got 250 members of staff. So it's a very large organisation. But I've worked in Hackney now for 20 years. Part of my work in Hackney as an executive head teacher is not just around my own settings, it's about having an impact on the wider education setting. And I have been a board member of New Regents College, which is a pupil referral unit. I'm also a board member on the re-engagement unit, which is an intervention for those children with challenging behaviour and social and emotional issues. I'm also proudly to say that I sit on Hackney and City Safeguarding Board and work with other organisations around the safeguarding of children. So I'm very experienced in terms of education. But a little bit about our facility and how it would operate. During my time in education, I've come to recognise that those children that come from challenging, that display challenging behaviour, often come from challenging backgrounds, and they often don't display the skills that they need to access mainstream education. My background as well is also in psychology, and working with my colleagues and other professionals and looking at research, we have done quite a lot of work on attachment theory and those children that have got attachment issues in terms of, and those attachment issues not enabling them to access education. I will not go on too long, but I then began working with Nurture UK, which is a recognised charity, and we opened and had accredited a nurture provision within one of my own schools, and the impact I saw on the young people in that nurture provision was incredible. They went from being children that could not sit and respond to the education, and then they changed in terms of by having a Nurture UK approach, which is a family setting which discusses and looks at that all behaviour is a form of communication. It sounds a bit woolly, but it isn't woolly. Believe me, the skills that those children develop are the skills that they need to enable them to learn, such as resilience. It improves their self-esteem, it improves their confidence. So in terms of what we are hoping to do, we have worked with Nurture UK and we are going to become partners with them. So the provision that we offer is based on the Nurture UK principles. And one of the councillors said about it's a wide age range. Yes, we're a wide age range of 7 to 18 because we recognise that secondary as well as primary age children need to develop these skills as well. And some secondary school children have not developed these skills. We also, if I just have a look at some of the things that I've written down, is we have been working, and I think it's recognised there, we have been working and had communication with the Director of Children's Services and also with the behaviour teams in Greenwich and also the inclusion team. And we, from the outset, have involved them to discuss what was needed in Woolwich and in the London Borough of Greenwich in terms of facilities. And when we've been having these conversations in terms of alternative provision, I've been told by the officers that children, young people, are never permanently excluded in Greenwich. However, there is a need for alternative provision for those young people that cannot access mainstream education. And I've also been told by the officers that there is a need for this provision, for quality provision, because they are always looking for more places. What there is also a need for is specialist provisions that meet social and emotional needs. And that is what our facility is for, to meet social and emotional needs, with the intention that those children can be developed and develop those skills to go back into mainstream education and have the opportunities that they're entitled to. I think one of the things that I would like to add is, I think it was touched on earlier.
Janice, this is going to be your final. This will be your final edition, okay?
All right. Sorry.
Thank you.
One of the things I just want to say is about fixed term exclusions is on the rise across nationally, but it's on the rise. But in particular, in this current context of both Black Lives Matter, who are overrepresented by those groups are usually children or young people from ethnic minorities, and they need quality provision to allow them to flourish and be successful in future life. I'll stop there because I know you want me to stop talking, but I could talk for England on this subject, so apologies.
Thank you very much, Janice. Questions from members? I can see I've got 3, 4 coming up. Excuse me. Start with Councillor Fletcher, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to comment on the sort of worthiness of alternative education. I think that is something which I'd hope we would all agree on the use of. And I thought that sort of trying to pitch from the agent there, to try and ask us not to approve this on the basis of the officer's recommendation and the planning policy was a slightly odd thing for a planning agent to say. Making an emotive appeal to us on the basis that alternative provision is a good thing, I think is rather inappropriate. I think we would all agree that alternative provision is a good thing and it's something that we need to have. The question that's before us is whether it's the right place for it to be, whether this is an appropriate application for this site. The good question that I have, and it might be something for Janice Bird to answer, is having sort of gone past the site, there is a sort of hoarding up. It says opening soon or opening at some point. I believe marketing materials have gone out on the assumption that this is going to be provided, and I've just looked now to try and sort of find some details of it, and I see that on Public Sector Building News has lots of internal photographs of the works that we're discussing this evening. So it might be that the planning officer could answer a question, say, have these works actually taken place? Because the photographs I'm looking at on this website show that the mezzanine floor and all the provisions that we're told that we were considering this evening. It looks as though they've taken place. Is that correct?
I believe so. I believe all the work's taken place. I don't believe the use has taken place. The first application was lodged on this site for this particular type of use late last year. And I believe since the lodgement of that, the works have been completed.
So are those unconsented works?
Yes, if they're related to the education facility, I would say so.
So this is in effect a retrospective application as well?
For the external alterations, yes, but for the use itself,
inclusion of a mezzanine floor and a lift and all of the other things that were on the proposed plans, which I'm looking at photographs of on this website.
For the works, yes. The use itself hasn't commenced as such, though.
Right. So when were the works consented, or have they not been?
No, they're as part of the application.
So okay, to clarify, those are not. So those are not consented works that have taken place. The addition of the lift, the external works, the addition of the mezzanine floor. That those are not consented works.
Yeah, they're not consented.
I think it might have been helpful if the report had highlighted that. So this is a retrospective application, in part.
In part, yes.
Okay, Chair. Well, I think, Chair, it might have been helpful if members were advised of that, because, as I say, having looked up the just now on this website and found this article on Public Sector Building News with photographs of the works, if I hadn't seen that, I would be under the impression this evening that this hadn't taken place. So
Nigel, that's a very, sorry, can I just comment on Nigel's comments, please? Nigel, that was a very helpful intervention. I was under no instruction, as it were, that this was a retrospective application.
Thank you, Chair. And so my question to either the agent or to Janice Bird is, why have these works taken place without permission having been granted for a change of use or for the works to have taken place?
Is either the agent or Janice going to speak?
In terms of a number of internal works, there are some internal works that have been carried out. I think that what we're finding is that this has been a development that's been in the melting pot for some considerable time, and the applicant, like we heard earlier this evening, it has been neither simple nor straightforward investing in this property, particularly over the last several months, in terms of COVID, in terms of ensuring that this building can be utilised. I think that ultimately there are elements, for example, the the installation of a new curtain wall on the ground floor, in terms of fresh air supply ventilation. There have been some works that are carried out, but the bulk of the building, as you see it, is approved. This is not like the earlier application where we've got changes to a listed building, which are as external changes. Many of these changes, the bulk of these changes are internal features, and were done while the builders were on the property as we were evolving the planning and trying to respond to sort of difficult times when in fact there has been no demand or requirement from A3, A4 uses, and therefore we don't want to have a building with hoardings around it. I think that ultimately it may well be that during the construction certain works have been conducted simply in terms of the efficiency. We've been endeavouring genuinely to work with the local authority. There have been several applications at a time where the builders are in the property, and you're trying to actually sort of ensure that you're sort of making the building fit for purpose. So I apologise if in fact there was any sort of misunderstanding. At the end of the day, there are no substantive external alterations of any significance. At the end of the day, yes, there has been one of the additional works internally, ultimately we're endeavouring to try and regularise that by way of this application. I think that the substantive point is that's been flagged up today was in terms of the suitability of this location for this type of activity.
Can I just interrupt you there? Sorry. I want to ask get some other questioners in, and if you're, I'm going to ask Linda, please, to come in, please. Linda Perks.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm looking at the, let me just get the paragraph. I'm looking at the comments from the local authority department, paragraph 6.3, where the education department says quite clearly, I just need to find it again. I'll find it in a minute. The local authority purchases individual placements from a range of registered providers operating from suitable premises that have successfully completed a tender process and have been accepted onto an approved suppliers list. Can I ask, is Sumas UK on the Royal Borough of Greenwich's approved suppliers list, please?
Yes, I can answer that question. No, we are not. But I have spoken to the Director of Children's Services in terms of on-the-spot purchasing, and the reason that we are not on that, list is because we would be preempting any permissions. So, because there is a cycle of application to get on the approved list, we were not able to get on it in time. So, therefore, we have discussed on-the-spot purchases, so and as and when needed.
Okay, thank you. And can you tell me, just give us some examples of which other facilities Sumas UK operates, please?
We don't. This would be the first one.
So, what do you think your chances are of getting onto an approved list then?
Well, given the amount of experience that I have, and also the head of centre, Tim Murphy, has, and he's got 30 years experience of working in both secondary and special education. And the fact that I've had conversations already with the education team in terms of the current context and the current needs. And also, in fact, that we are working with Nurture UK, and I don't know if people are aware, but Nurture UK are part of a project that's happening in Greenwich already with the Violence Reduction Unit. And the Violence Reduction Unit are working with Nurture UK on a project working in secondary schools, 2 identified secondary schools, to promote the nurture approach to have an impact on those children with social and emotional needs. So
okay, that's fine.
That's fine. Thank you
very much.
Can I just bring in, please? I noticed that Alex Smith, one of our planning officers, has got his hand up and obviously wants to make a contribution at this stage.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify a few things, because I appreciate that the proposal, the description of the proposal doesn't say it's retrospective. But in the officer's report at 5.13, it does state that, which is in the proposal section, it does state it is noted that the external works proposed as part of this application have been completed without the benefit of planning permission. And obviously, one of the photos that was shown by the planning officer, unfortunately due to current circumstances, not being able to go out on site and take photos, we weren't able to take a photo of the updated 38 Wellington Street, so we weren't able to show. But I think over the last couple of months, windows have gone in and works were being done prior to that. Also, just want to clarify as well, in the report it identifies there are currently 2 appeals on the site. They were for similar uses. We raised concern with one of those appeals in terms of the educational use, because there was a lack of detail. During that appeal, the inspector allowed additional information, which is part of this current application in terms of what that contained. At that point, because the inspector allowed that, we had to consider that. It went back to our education, and they raised no objection, as they do now. Therefore, in that appeal, we said that we would no longer continue with that that reason for recommending refusal, and we aren't defending that at appeal any longer. So I don't know whether that makes any difference to members' consideration, but at appeal we have had to consider that information, and we no longer are fighting that appeal on the unacceptable use.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Just one point for me as chair, for a little bit ago, you mentioned that you knew that external works had undertaken, but the point that was raised earlier on the first question by the leader of the opposition was the fact that it was the internal works that he'd been looking at photographs of, not external works. I mean, we've all seen bits of the works when we were trotting down to Greenwich and things like that being done, but not only sort of behind the screening or whatever, not necessarily full internal, like things like lifts, staircase fitting out. But right, I'm going to move on to some other people who've been waving their hands for ages. And Dominic has been one of the first. Please, Dominic, you come in.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Chris and Janice, for your in-depth explanation. I think it is usually a great idea to have alternative provision for especially people who are vulnerable and people that are needing more or less social and emotional needs. My question is absolutely something regarding the fact that if you think about the well-being of these people as well, these children as well, you are also thinking about their physical well-being, equally their mental well-being, and it cannot be achieved if, for instance, there is no kind of outdoor playgrounds, athletic type of facilities that will be able to be available for these people. I just wanted you to comment on how you look at that part of it, because it's very important for the well-being of this category of people that we are trying to give the opportunity. And then to also mention, I know you did mention something about the noise. The noise, I mean, it is also important to acknowledge that when it comes to noise as well, this category or group of people naturally will make noise, and it is absolutely a way of expressing themselves. So how can that be managed in a way? So
thank you, Dominic.
Yes, thank you.
I'll address the question about exercise and well-being. Yeah. In terms, we recognise that the space is limited. However, we have got the dining space is also a breakout space, and there are other breakout spaces available within the building. But according to the regulations and guidance, if there is not facility within a building, you can take young people off-site. And that is our intention, is to take young people off-site. We've had conversations, and we're negotiating currently to use local facilities, the local leisure centre, and obviously due to COVID, we're waiting for confirmation there. But yes, we recognise that, and because the groups will be so small, there's only 8 young people, we will be able to take them off-site easily. So that answers that question. Right. Can I just answer the question a bit about the noise from an educational point of view?
Yeah.
Obviously. Briefly, please. Briefly. Sorry, I've got a lot of other questioners.
Our alternative provision is 32 young people as a max. So the amount of noise that 32 young people will make in 4 separate classrooms, I appreciate there's noise in education, but in comparison to maybe another commercial unit, be a pub or something else, it will be minimal.
Can I just clarify a point there before I let the other questions in? You said 32. I thought the number that was being mentioned was 60.
The reason it's been 60 is for tuition, but in terms of the alternative provision in the day, we've limited the numbers to 4 classes of 8. So
okay,
the reason 60
okay, that's fine. I'll bring in Councillor Lacow, please.
Thank you, Chair. Now, I think I'll just go back to comments made by Councillor Fletcher in the beginning. I don't think there's any question about the efficacy of this kind of provision or the need for the provision. But I am still very, very concerned about the appropriateness of the area that it's located. And I'm up to this point, have not really heard anything that mitigates enough against that.
Can I talk about in terms of security and security measures that will be in place inside the building? In terms of to get into the building, there is 2 entrances and there is a security system in place there. There is also the children's area or the young people's area is also security access for staff only. But apart from that, in terms of the procedures that we have in place before anybody is admitted to our facility, in terms of working with the previous setting, in terms of what they think risks may be, in terms of us doing an admissions process that involves a home visit to discuss with parents and young people, but also wanting to work with the police and the youth offending team and social services and having a holistic multi-agency approach to making a difference for these young people. So in terms of security, we take it very seriously. We already have a DSL, a designated safeguarding lead that is trained in place, who is familiar with all safeguarding procedures. So in terms of security, and we appreciate where we're sitting and where we are in Woolwich and some of the risks that have been highlighted, but we're trying to mitigate all of those.
Thank you. Councillor Mardner, please. And then Councillor Gardner. I think that's the last 2 questioners apart from myself.
Thank you. Hello. I've got a couple of questions. First, I'd like to get your response to the police comments about that vulnerable age group and the location. I am concerned in terms of the issues that he has raised, and I've not yet heard anything that is going to respond to that. My second question is, you talked correctly about the education needs. Have you applied or have you attended or attached yourself to any other school? Because in my opinion, a local school with this facility would provide a better location. And what comments have you had, or what discussions have you had in terms of a management plan on this? Because it feels to me that it feels rushed, it feels retrospective, and it feels that you're only aiming to try and be in place by September, and that's not, in my opinion, the way that we deal with the education of our children. So I am still concerned, and I'd be grateful if you could respond to those questions.
Thank you, Clive, for those questions.
Right, in terms of attaching with another school, we are not a mainstream local authority school. We're an independent provision. So we have
it's a private company. You're a private company, aren't you?
A private company,
You're a private limited company, yeah.
Yes, so we've been working with the local authority around what needs they have and what placements they may need in terms of the current context. So that's financial. Pardon?
No, I'm listening.
Oh, sorry. In terms of it being rushed, this has been quite some time in the making. This has not been rushed at all. We put our applications in terms of with Ofsted for registration, and also with working with Nurture UK. It's been some time that we've been talking about having an alternative provision that is based on the principles of Nurture UK. So it is not rushed. It seems rushed currently because of the COVID situation and where things have been delayed. But believe me, this has taken a long time to get to this point.
Okay, thank you very much, Dave.
Sorry,
Clive, come back for a second.
Answer Councillor Modner's very good question, if I may, in terms of the appropriateness of this particular location, because I've had this for 30 years in relation to mental health, and of course I started with working with the Department of Health in relation to psychiatric hospitals, and they were, remember the old Claybury Hospital, the old Rumwell Hospital, the old...
Could you make your point, please?
Yeah, the point is that in terms of, with those facilities, it was perceived to be that a remote, out-of-time location was suitable for this type of use. However, over the years, that has been rejected as being appropriate in favour of sustainable locations.
Sorry, sir, I've got that. All I asked was about the police comments. Could you respond to that, please?
Of course. I think, again, we work very closely with the police because...
Sorry, the police
we work
have made...
closely with the police.
Could you answer Councillor Mardner's question, please, rather than give us another reiteration? Thank you.
Okay. Condition 10 clearly refers to secure by design, which was a condition.
I'm sorry, we're back to building regs. Can you answer Councillor Mardner's question, please?
About the police comments. If you can't, it's fine. If you can't, it's fine. I'll just accept the police comments and we can move on. Okay?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gardner, please.
If I could have the opportunity to comment on the police comment.
Well, let's see what Councillor Gardner's saying, because I've got quite a lot of questions as well.
Thank you, Chair. I have 3 questions. Firstly, I've been trying to find more details about SUMUS. The only thing I can find on Companies House is SUMUS Education Limited, which is somewhere in Thornaby and Cleveland on Teesside, set up just a few months ago at the end of 2015. And I wondered if that was it or whether I've missed it, whether it's a registered charity. And also,
it's a limited company.
From that, I wondered about the business model and therefore how sustainable it is, given it's a new organisation. This tuition, is the tuition for the same cohort of children in alternative education, children that have been excluded from school or so forth? Otherwise, it would be in competition with school, preschool and post-school provision, which we know is always on the edge to try and sustain that for schools. So I'm a bit unclear as to the business model and sustainability. And lastly, to revert to my previous point about the better use of the outdoor space. There's only very limited outdoor space at the front of the side, but have we thought about greening and benches and so forth, so that they can sit outside a nice day a bit? It would be a better use of that space than just a single tree that's there at the moment and paper stones.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. And if this will be the last question before we go to our debate.
Can I, if I answer the question on tuition, the tuition is for the community, in terms of the community of Woolwich, those people that would like to access high quality tuition delivered by experienced qualified teachers, whereas my experience of tuition, that has not been the case in terms of being in a building that's built for purpose. So yes, it's tuition, but it's quality tuition.
Fine, thank you. Right, in that case, colleagues, I'm going to open this one up to the floor, and I'll take comments from people. So my machine's just doing stupid things again, but not breaking down, luckily. But before we do, I'm actually going to take chair's privilege here and say I'm really concerned by this, as to kick off this debate. I'm really concerned by this offer. I'm concerned from hearing, I'm concerned about the security. 2 single doors, one down the side street, one on the main street. We all know this site very, very well, obviously, because it's next to the town hall. I take that interesting point that the police representative made, which was defensible space. When we've got one of our schools or one of our off-site units, they're in a space, and there's a space between the doors and where you are. I've been involved, as another member of this panel has, in a totally different types of space that needed high security, which are clubs in the West End. And we had better security than that was being proposed. 2 single doors. I'm very concerned. That's my opening gambit on this one. The other one would be, I'm slightly concerned that being told that our Director of Children's Services appears to approve this. I'd like to have that in writing, actually. And the other thing, there was private tuition mentioned, and in the final just a little while ago, your comments about the tuition, all of our tuition in Greenwich to people like this is delivered through Children's Services, and all of our teachers are fully qualified, thank you. And so I will say personally on that one. I would also open up my comments for this debate. How will the younger pupils, we didn't hear any about this, but the age range of 17 to 18-year-olds, how are they going to be segregated within this space? How are they going to be segregated within this space? And it seems rushed. I think Clive said that Councillor Marden said that towards the end. It seems rushed and vague. And that was summed up, I think, in the approach to exercise. We are thinking about, we hope to, excuse me, too many meetings. We hope to have exercise facilities arranged. How are you going to get them out? How are you going to get them back in? How are you going to get into the exercise space? And with whom and where? With whom? You talked about leisure. There was a leisure centre mentioned. I'm going to give my 5 pence worth tonight because I've barely spoken. There was a talk about using a leisure centre. Well, actually, we're knocking down our leisure centre at the moment, and there's another one not going to be built for some years. So, I mean, I think there are some real issues on that. But I go back to the security of the children, defensible space, the fact that we do supply, our RBG doesn't turn its back on these types of pupils at all and never has done. And I would now open it up to debate from my colleagues. And I think you can hear I'm quite passionate about this one. Thank you. Councillor Fletcher, please.
Thank you, Chair. I also have serious concerns over.
You were asking the people.
Sorry, I think Councillor Marden needs to use himself. Thank you, Chair. I also have serious concerns over this application. I mean, the main ones that I think are on planning grounds are really on the basis of it being an unsuitable site, I think, for an educational facility of this sort. I did take rather exception, as I think you probably gathered, to the approach that was taken to the presentation from the applicant, where we were being asked essentially to endorse the principle of alternative provision as a public good, which clearly it is, and that therefore we should approve this application. I think that's a deeply misleading and wrong-headed way of looking at it, and is rather unfair. But my main concern is over the facilities that will be available, the fact that there is, as we've just heard, limited access to outside space and to exercise facilities and that sort of thing. These are very difficult issues. We've heard about the expertise that is being provided by the staff who will be working there. You know, some of us have family members who also work in education and work with very challenging and difficult children, and I know from that this is not an ideal site. You know, this is a building that was supposed to provide residential flats on the upper levels, and the use classes that were provided for the lower levels at street level were clearly for retail, restaurant, and so on, and office facilities. This was not a site that was clearly going to be ideal for any type of educational provision, but educational provision for the most challenging children, I think it's very difficult indeed. Those are the grounds on which I think we should reject this. I would say, however, that I find, having twice this evening had applications that were retrospective and were noted as being retrospective. I said on both of them that I consider that to be a red flag when I see that. On both of those, the applicant and the officers convinced me that there were reasons why that happened and provided a reasonable explanation for that. We then reach a third application this evening where we were not told upfront that this was a retrospective application. It was, I'm grateful for the clarification, it was noted in the report, but that was not how it was presented. And it's only because, you know, through the wonders of Google, we're able to see that these works have taken place. And this is being marketed as though it is about to open and this is a formality. On the basis, we're told, of conversations that have happened with other council departments. That's as may be. But this has not been consented. These works should not have taken place.
No.
This company that is marketing itself as being about to provide this should not be marketing itself on the grounds that this was about to be consented. That, I think, is very concerning. It's also been noted. I think another member said that they just looked it up on Companies House. I've done the same. And the other thing that I noted on that is that the directors of the company, some of them are also noted as being directors of the property developer, which I find rather odd. And looking to see whether any of the leadership team or any of the people we've heard from this evening are listed as the management board. If I look on this Summers UK website and look for management board, there is nothing listed there. It's empty. It says this is awaiting whatever. It says required on it. There is nobody listed there. The lack of information that officers noted had been provided earlier as a concern, that there was very limited information provided about this facility and this company. Just on a cursory look, there's not an awful lot of information being provided here. And I think that should also concern us. Whether that's a planning issue or not, I'll leave it to officers to advise. I've set out my reasons why I think that this is the wrong site for this, and why I think that therefore it's an inappropriate development. It's not an appropriate use class for that building in that location. But I would like to note, Chair, as I'm sure, I think from some of the comments we've heard, many of us would, that there are other issues that I think we should register our concern over.
Thank you very much. I will do that. Councillor Cow, please.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think I could add much more than Councillor Fletcher did on this subject, but I would also add just slightly that the point you made, Chair, of the age range, which is from 7 to 18, in such a confined space, there's no clarity about how that sort of age group would be managed. But very, very strongly, I have concerns about the location, the group, the vulnerable group that would be catered for, and how they could be easy pickings, if you like, for some of the gang activities within the area. So I would be very concerned about going ahead with this. And like Councillor Fletcher said, when people I've not had a good enough explanation as to why those elements that are retrospective are coming at this stage. So
thank you very much, Avril. Thank you. Linda, please. And then Clive finally, and we will then go for a vote.
Thank you, Chair. I've got similar concerns. I mean, I agree on the grounds of unsuitable site. I'm very persuaded by the arguments put forward by the Metropolitan Police that it's not just an issue of secure by design. No. It's also an issue about protecting vulnerable children and young people from the local environment. And I do think I'm very persuaded by those arguments. The second one I'm concerned about, which I imagine should be a planning issue, is that The support for the education department for this application states quite clearly about this issue, that they're purchasing placements from a range of registered providers operating from suitable premises. Well, we've already dealt with the question of, is it a suitable premises and its location? But this company is not on approved suppliers. It's not even practicing at this stage as an education facility in any shape or form, and therefore has no track record. So I raised the question, would it ever get onto an approved suppliers list? And on those grounds, I think there's a real question about whether or not the operation on the site is at all viable. So on those two grounds, I'm afraid I'm not at all supportive of the application. We'll be voting against.
Thank you. And then finally, Clive, and then we will move to a vote.
Chair, I fully endorse the comments that you have made. I fully endorse the comments that Councillor Fletcher has made. I am very much persuaded by the comments made by Metropolitan Police in terms of location and with this vulnerable age group. I will be voting against, that's all I've got to say on this, because everything already has been said, Chair.
Thank you very much. At this stage, I'm going to ask the clerk of the meeting to take back over, please, and to do the usual, which is to circulate, not forgetting Councillor Gardner, circulate around the Zoom.
Sorry, Chair, can I just interrupt for a second? I can basically see you guys are minded to refuse. We just need to summarise the reasons for refusal before I go to the vote.
Okie doke. Right, I will get my list. I think, and if colleagues could remind me if I've missed any. The reason for our refusal would be our worries about the facility's security, our worries about access to open space and exercise, not the exercise, the open space, sorry, it's not a planning condition. Our worries that it is totally an inadequate set of premises for this group of pupils with complex needs in this location. Is that an adequate summary? I'll take guidance, please.
And the safeguard those students as well.
Yes, the safeguarding, on-street safeguarding.
Yeah, and also, Chair, remember we need to take on board and note the police's objections to this as well.
Yes, thank you very much.
Chair, can I, before you go to the vote, can I just have a discussion? So
Yes,
the
please.
facilities and the security leads into what the Metropolitan Police have said, so secure by design.
Yeah.
The access to open space, I think you just need to be mindful if you include that we've already dropped that reason.
Okay,
for
thank you very much. I'll drop that one then, yeah.
In terms of the inadequate set of premises for this group of needs, I think, can you just give us a bit more clarity on what you actually mean by that? And lastly, I think the safeguarding of the pupils is not a material planning consideration. It's a wider issue. I totally understand what you're saying, but we need to stick to using it on planning issues.
Thank you very much, Vicky. Good guidance for me. Yes, my comment on was the segregation. How would pupils aged 7 to 18 with complex needs be segregated within this small space?
So I do think that is more of a management issue rather than a planning.
Okay. Well, in that case, we will reject. I'm suggesting that we are rejecting this application on the basis of security and safeguarding.
Yeah,
not safeguarding, as Vicky said. But
it's security and the secure by design.
Secure by design.
And how that
as
operates
commented on
in
by
terms
the
of
Metropolitan Police.
Yeah, the premises. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
But the security is about the location, I think, as well, Vicky. It's not just the design of the building. It's actually
No, it's where it's located.
It's more about the location, yeah. Thank you.
In what respect?
With the police's arguments that the location of the building means that pupils will be,
At
if
risk.
they can be protected, the pupils will be at risk.
But they also talk.
But isn't that an issue that when they leave the facilities, we need to explore this because we need to make sure that that the reasons for refusal are based on solid planning grounds. Is it when the pupils leave the building? So when they're not in the building or under the protection of the use, they then wander into Woolwich to other things. And I think that probably goes further than what you're allowed to do in planning. I think if you're not satisfied about what the Metropolitan Police said about the security of the building and the design of the building, I'm not sure I'd feel strictly comfortable about when a pupil leaves or when a pupil comes and they're walking through Woolwich. That would be no different from any other use and a child wandering around.
Can't we just then use the design?
So I think that's where you're going. It's about the security by design issue. Yeah. I'm sorry to labour the point. I just need to make sure that it's
no, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
Nikki, can I explore something as well? I think at 9/11 in the report there was a requirement for marketing the ground floor space for D2 use, which was included in the section 106.
Yes.
I think this goes back to what Councillor Gardner was saying earlier about the commitments that were made when the site was developed. The retention of D2 use, as I said in my remarks, it was quite clear to me what the intention was for that building when it was consented.
See how difficult it is.
Which was that it was going to be residential above and it was going to be retail. And as we've said there was a concession made written into the 106 that it will be marketed for D2 as well. So I think from my perspective, the loss of the D2 is also material there. Is that something we add?
So I might ask the case officer to come in and assist on this one. My understanding is they have provided marketing evidence. Matt, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, so under the previous application in 2018 for the B1 use, they provided some marketing evidence and which said those other previously approved uses weren't suitable and other uses should be explored. So that was accepted back then, and now they've proposed similar marketing evidence as part of this application. So there is a marketing report online, and we've already accepted this for the B1 use, which was approved in 2018. So I would say that they have met it, and considering we've already accepted this information on a previous decision, it's been met. So the legal advice in regards to section 106 was, they said it's very difficult to, so I've just got it here, I can read through a few comments for you. So a breach of section 106, it's difficult to make it really a material planning consideration for a new use that's on the site. So nevertheless, they did provide the marketing evidence as part of the B1 use approval on the site and this use as well. So I think they're kind of, although there must have been some intent previously, I wasn't involved previously, about having a D2 use and other uses on that ground floor. This is a separate application which we have to consider separately to that section 106. This use wasn't entangled or proposed previously.
Yeah, and part of my comment and my reason for advocating refusal is that I object to the reclassification and the change of use. I think it's inappropriate for D1. I mean, surely that is material.
That's a material concern.
I think the loss of the currently consented use classes by it being extended to D1, which I think is inappropriate.
But it's not on the marketing because the marketing has already been accepted to allow a different use, the B1 use, to come in for the to result in the loss of a D2 use. So the marketing is the same for this application as it was for the B1 use, which has already been accepted as sufficient to allow a different use. So your objection to the use is not around the marketing because that's already been accepted. It's about this use in that premises and meeting the security of the premises and the issues raised by the Met Police.
I mean, I think at this stage, as we go to a vote, I would suggest that we go with the advice of the Metropolitan Police, which was very extensive, very rigorous and very clear about their opposition to having a facility here. It wasn't actually only about going to the unit or leaving the unit and what happens when, because I take your point, Vicky, that would happen with any child going to any educational institution. That was actually about the defensible space of this unit, and it has 2 single doors and no outdoor defensible space. So there is no way you will have people. What happens if, for example, you had 15 young people around one of the doors? How do you then? So that's the worry. It's the fact that the premises are inadequate for purpose.
Yeah, I think yeah, I understand now, so that's fine.
Okay.
Sure. I wonder whether this might result in people groaning, but I wonder if we might consider, given that a lot of our concerns are around lack of information and lack of answers on this, given that there seems to be some debate over what are allowable planning grounds, given our clear feeling evidence, might it be an option for us to move deferral for further information? I just wonder whether the assistant director is comfortable with us making a determination on these grounds at this time.
So I couldn't agree with that, Nigel.
No. I think it's been made very clear. Irrespective of people's other feelings about other matters, that it was actually the comments that I just made about defensible space and security of the unit and it being inadequate for purpose.
So can we move to vote then? I think you've summed it up really well.
Thank you. Yes, let's move to a vote then. Could I now ask the clerk to start that process again with the amendment, as it were, to the motion? And I'm sorry to load you with such the dross of this way of working, but could you also ask beforehand, has anyone lost contact for any length of time before they vote, please?
Councillor Dillon, have you lost connection at any point, and are you voting for, against or abstaining on the officer's recommendations?
My connection has been fine, thanks Nasir, and I am against the application.
Okay. Councillor Lacal, have you had any issues regarding your connection, and are you voting for, against or abstaining on the application?
I've had no issues with my connection and I'll be voting against.
Councillor Fletcher, have you had any issues regarding your connection, and are you voting for, against or abstaining on the officer's recommendation?
I've had no issues and I'm voting against. Thank you.
Councillor Mardner, have you had any issues regarding the connection, and are you voting for, against or abstaining?
No issues, voting against.
Councillor Perks, same question.
No issues with the connection and I'm voting against. Thank you.
Councillor Gardner, any issues regarding connection? Are you voting for, against or abstaining on the application?
No issues with connection and voting against.
Councillor Mbang, any issues regarding connection, and are you voting for, against or abstaining on the officer's recommendations?
I had no issues with my connection at all, and I'm equally voting against. Thank you.
And that leaves Chair, Councillor Brain. Have you had any issues regarding your connection, and are you voting for, against, or abstaining on the officer's recommendations?
I had no issues with the connection. The only point during that last debate when my screen went dark was the fact that I was plugging in my mains lead and I was saving the video by saving the power by switching the camera off. But I heard all of the proceedings and there was no interruption at all, and I shall be voting against.
Okay, that is a unanimous decision refusing the officer's recommendations, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'll reiterate that application is denied. Thank you very much, everyone. It's been a very long evening. Thank you for your concentrated efforts on all three items, and thank you very much. There are some issues that are raised in this, which I will be following up on Monday. I'm taking a day's leave tomorrow, as it's our youngest daughter's birthday, and she's off to the States very shortly. But I will be taking those up, particularly where there are issues around links to children's services and other departments. I will be taking those up formally.
Okay, and Chair, we did talk a little bit about looking at policy around wheelchair accessibility for hotel, for holiday stay.
Yeah, I've got that noted, Clive.
And policy about HMO accommodation in terms of accessibility as well.
Yeah, I've got that
Great
noted.
if you can pick those two up as well, Chair.
Yeah, I will do. I'll get on to the appropriate cabinet member.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? I think that's the lot. It's just coming up to, I think, 2 minutes past 10. It feels like about 2 minutes past midnight. But as I'm having the day off tomorrow, that's something anyway. If Vicky, there's anything you want to, I'm happy to stay on if there's anything you want to talk about separately.
No, that's fine, Chair.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, everyone, thank you very much for a long and tiring but also very interesting evening.